Chapter 698. Lin Sun didn't care about being ignored because he knew Lu Wenting meant no harm. "This is my ID card." Lin Sun handed over a special bronze nameplate, on which the number 39 was written and the number 12 was written on the back. "Lin Shurer, from Camp 39 of the Bloodthirsty Camp?" Lu Wenting took it and recognized Lin Sun immediately. He seemed to be enlightened. "No wonder you can hunt so many military merits. It turns out that you are a trainee of the Bloodthirsty Camp. Which year are you from? Who is the chief instructor?" "I entered the Bloodthirsty Camp 4 years ago. The chief instructor is Shu Sanchi," Lin Sun said casually. Lu Wenting's eyes suddenly became strange and he said in surprise, 4 years ago? 4 years ago you were just in the martial realm?" Lin Sun nodded. "In 4 years, he broke through the Gang Spirit Realm and Sea Spirit Realm from the martial realm to the higher Tao Insight Realm. It was amazing." Lu Wenting was shocked. After a long silence, he sighed with emotion. "The younger generation will surpass the older. By the way, which camp are you from?" Lin Sun was stunned and said, "I just arrived at the Bloodthirsty battlefield today." "What?" Lu Wenting lost his voice and his face changed completely as if he had heard something incredible. "You said, you just arrived at the Bloodthirsty battlefield today?" Lin Sun frowned. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. "This is my recommendation letter." Lin Sun took out a secret jade letter given to him by Zhao Tailai and handed it over. Lu Wenting opened it and was stunned. His face became more and more strange, with shock and doubt. It seemed that he had encountered a great problem. After a long time, he took a deep breath and looked at Lin Sun. "It's late. Why don't I arrange a residence for you and talk about other things tomorrow?" Lin Sun nodded and agreed. A moment later, in front of a row of stone houses on the hillside. "Your Excellency Lin, most of the houses here are vacant. You can choose one at will as your residence." The attendant arranged by Lu Wenting led Lin Sun here and gave him a brief introduction. Then he left in a hurry, leaving Lin Sun confused. He had wanted to ask more about the camp, but unfortunately, the attendant had been tight-lipped from beginning to end. Lin Sun took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. He chose a stone house at random and pushed the door open. It was obvious that no one lived in this house. The table, the bed, and the various furnishings were all covered in dust. After a little cleaning, Lin Sun lay on the bed, but there were still many doubts in his mind, which made him not in the mood to cultivate. Camp 7? It seemed that this was not the only camp of the Empire in the bloodthirsty battlefield. There was also Lu Wenting. His behavior was too abnormal when he found out that he had arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield today. There must be a reason behind it. After thinking for a while, Lin stood up and pushed the door open. He needed to find someone to ask about the basic situation of the camp, and he already had a candidate in mind. The commander of the guards in charge of guarding the watchtower, Bloodknife Tavern. When the guard commander, who called himself Old Huang, brought Lin Sun here, Lin Sun was a little surprised. He didn't expect that there was such a place in the barrack. The tavern was very lively. Xiozhi gathered in groups of 3 to 5, drinking and chatting. The atmosphere was noisy and chaotic. "Your Excellency, it's a good place to chat, isn't it? Many practitioners in our barracks would come here to drink and vent after returning from the battlefield. Otherwise, the days of killing and death would be too monotonous and depressing. Anyone would collapse here." Old Huang sighed with emotion. He ordered a pot of wine and sat opposite Lin Sun to drink. The wine was specially brewed for practitioners, tasted as sharp and strong as a knife. A pot of wine cost Lin Sun 30 points. The 2 second-class military merits he exchanged today only gave him 1,000 points in total. That was to say, a second-class military merit could be exchanged for 500 points. These points could be used to exchange for all kinds of materials, including the consumption in this tavern. "I want to ask you something," Lin Sun said after some deliberation. Old Huang waved his hand at once. I dare not ask for advice. If I can help you, I promise to tell you everything I know. Lin Sun didn't beat around the bush and ask the question he was most concerned about. It's my first time to come to the bloodthirsty battlefield. What common sense do you think a newcomer like me should know first? Puff. The wine in old Huang's mouth sprayed out at once. He choked and almost burst into tears. But he ignored it and looked at Lin Sun in astonishment. Are you kidding, Your Excellency? Kidding. Old Huang was an old man who had been through mountains of corpses and seas of blood in the bloodthirsty battlefield, but he had never seen such a newcomer. Could a newcomer cut off an arm of a descendant of the dark barbarian royal family? How could a newcomer cross the battlefield alone and arrive at the barracks safely? The scariest thing was that this newcomer had brought along a small mountain of luggage, which was filled with bloody military merits. Lin Sun tapped the table with his fingers casually and said with a faint smile, "Do you think I'm kidding?" Old Huang shook his head at once, but he was still a little shocked. He looked at Lin Sun with an unconcealable weirdness, which was exactly the same as Lu Wenting's. Lin Sun smiled at once. Old Huang's reaction made him realize that he had found the right person this time. Under Lin Sun's intentional guidance, Lin Sun soon got a lot of information from Old Huang. It turned out that the bloodthirsty battlefield was like a plain of war isolated from the world. There were 8 barracks of the Empire stationed here, each of which was garrisoned by an elite army of practitioners of the Empire. A life-death realm king was in charge of the war affairs in the barrack. In addition, there were many teams of rogue practitioners in the barrack. They risked their lives to come here for nothing more than to exchange some military merits for the wealth they needed. Most of these rogue practitioners were organized by aristocratic families. Some were strong, some were weak, and they were scattered. They often acted in groups and went to the battlefield to hunt enemies. Of course, there were also some tough ones who acted alone. The most important thing was that the bloodthirsty battlefield would open the passageway to the Empire every 3 years. Only at this time could the practitioners of the Empire in the bloodthirsty battlefield have the opportunity to communicate with the Empire and ask for assistance or replenishment of military supplies. Now, there was still half a year before the passageway to the Empire opened in the bloodthirsty battlefield, but Lin Sun suddenly came here today, which naturally seemed very abnormal. I see. Lin Sun finally understood that he was specially taken care of by Zhao Tailai. He also knew the reason why Lu Wenting and Huang were shocked. Every time the channel is opened, it means the activation of a giant teleportation array that can cross realms. The consumption of high-rank spirit crystals alone is an astronomical figure. With the financial resources of the Empire, we can only ensure that it is activated once every 3 years. Huang sighed with emotion, but the way he looked at Lin soon became more and more strange. If this young man really came to the bloodthirsty battlefield today, didn't it mean that the Empire opened a passageway especially for him? That was incredible. When I came here, I used the transmission formation set up by the sages in the ancient times, which can only be used by one person. Lin Sun explained casually. Even so, Huang still realized that Lin Sun's identity must not be simple. Otherwise, how could the Empire make an exception to send him to the bloodthirsty battlefield alone? So, you haven't got any news from the Empire in the past 2.5 years? Lin Sun suddenly asked. Well, it should be so. Unless there is a great change, the bloodthirsty battlefield and the Empire can only communicate once every 3 years. Huang nodded. 2.5 years ago, Lin Sun pondered. At that time, it seemed that I had just entered the Forbidden City for less than half a year. I had just been certified as a spiritual tattooist and attended the 300th birthday party of the Empress. Doesn't it mean that almost no one in the bloodthirsty battlefield knows what I have done in the past 2.5 years? Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. That's good. The less news about me, the safer I will be. Huang, have you heard about the Master of Heart-Cleansing Peak? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Huang was stunned. The Master of Heart-Cleansing Peak? What the hell is that? Lin Sun burst into laughter. Senior Huang was even more bewildered. This young man before him is too strange, and he's filled with mysteriousness. No matter what, he's surely an extraordinary great figure. Otherwise, how could he possibly be sent to the bloodthirsty battlefield all by himself today? Such treatment was not something that just anyone could enjoy. General, I have something urgent to report. Lu Wenting took a deep breath, tried to calm himself down, and then knocked on the closed door in front of him. Come in. The door opened silently. The room was not big, but it was very clean and tidy. At this moment, a solemn middle-aged man with black hair, thick eyebrows and tiger-like eyes was sitting at the desk. Even though he was sitting down, he still had the aura of a dragon and a tiger. He was General Zhang Sunlai, the ruler of Camp 7 of the Empire. He was a decisive and domineering life-death realm king. General, a strange young man came to our camp today. Lu Wenting took the initiative to tell everything about Lin Sun before Zhang Sunlai asked. He specially pointed out that Lin Sun would arrive at the bloodthirsty battlefield today. Zhang Sunlai didn't care much about it at first. Even when he heard that Lin Sun cut off the arm of a dark barbarian prince, he just raised his eyebrows slightly. But when he learned that Lin Sun would arrive today, Zhang Sunlai suddenly straightened his back. At that moment, he was like a mountain rising from the ground and piercing into the sky, giving people a kind of oppressive aura that assaulted their faces. Alone? Zhang Sunlai asked, his eyes overflowing with divine light. Lu Wenting handed over the secret letter. This is the recommendation letter of Bloodthirsty King. Please have a look. Zhang Sunlai took it and looked at it. His eyes were slightly fixed at first, and then his dark eyebrows suddenly frowned. There was only one sentence in the secret letter: be fair and don't need special treatment. Chapter 699. Gazing at the handwriting on the secret letter for a long time, Zhang Sunlai finally couldn't hold back and asked, Wenting, what do you think the bloodthirsty chieftain meant? Lu Wenting also felt a headache. He said hesitantly, judging from the situation, this young man is not simple. That's why he was sent to the bloodthirsty battlefield alone. Zhang Sunlai interrupted. I'm asking what the bloodthirsty chieftain meant. Lu Wenting frowned. General, you're putting me in a difficult position. The bloodthirsty chieftain is unfathomable. How can a subordinate like me guess what he's thinking? Zhang Sunlai frowned even more. He slapped the table and muttered, Damn it, he said he wouldn't be given special treatment. But who dares to do that? The old bastard bloodthirsty chieftain is so annoying. He just said that and it's over. But now he's giving me a headache. Old bastard. Lu Wenting's eyes widened. He smiled bitterly in his heart. Perhaps only the general in front of him dared to call the bloodthirsty chieftain an old bastard. General, in my opinion, this young man must be extraordinary. That's why the bloodthirsty chieftain sent him to the bloodthirsty battlefield alone. Since the bloodthirsty chieftain said to handle things fairly for this young man, then we'll just follow his orders. Lu Wenting carefully chose his words. Of course, although we won't give special treatment to this young man, we still have to pay attention to his safety when necessary, in case something happens to him and we can't explain it to the bloodthirsty chieftain in the future. Zhang Sunlai rubbed between his eyebrows and sighed. That's the only way. The old bastard left the bloodthirsty battlefield several years ago. It's okay that he's not here, but now he sends a young man here to make things difficult for me. What a bastard! Speaking of this, he seemed to realize something and asked, Have you ever asked him what he wants to do in the bloodthirsty battlefield? Lu Wenting shook his head and said helplessly, I was so shocked at that time that I didn't have the mood to ask about this. How about I ask him tomorrow? After pondering for a while, Zhang Sunlai waved his hand and said, Forget it. There's no need to ask about it. As long as he doesn't make any big trouble in the bloodthirsty battlefield, we'll turn a blind eye to it. I'm busy fighting with the kings of the voodoo barbarian bastards every day. I have no time to pay attention to that boy. Lu Wenting nodded. Indeed, for a general like Zhang Sunlai who was in charge of a camp, he indeed didn't have the energy to pay attention to a young man who had been sent here out of the blue. Of course, keep an eye on his movements. He can have an accident or even die, but he can never die in my territory, Zhang Sunlai added. Although his words were harsh, Lu Wenting knew that because of the secret letter from the bloodthirsty king, Lin Shi would not get any real, special care, but Lu Wenting could not help but care about his safety. Lu Wenting couldn't help murmuring, "This guy is really a hot potato. There are 8 camps in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Why did he come to our camp? If only we could send him to another camp, then we wouldn't be in such a dilemma, Zhang Sunlai's eyes lit up like a torch. Send him away? That's feasible. But let's observe him for a while first. As long as he doesn't make trouble, I, a general of the Empire, can't tolerate a young man." Lu Wenting smiled knowingly. General is right. It's good if he doesn't make trouble. If he does, we can only send this hot potato to the generals of other camp. How can you talk like that? Zhang Sunlai glared at him, but in the end, he couldn't help laughing. Lin Sun didn't know that his sudden arrival gave a general and a quartermaster in charge of supplies a headache and entanglement. He was still talking with old Huang at the moment. Although it was late at night, the Bloodthirsty Blade Tavern was getting more and more lively. Imperial practitioners gathered here, each of them fierce and ruthless. They were drinking and chatting noisily with each other. Old Huang was also drunk. His face and nose were red, and his eyes were blurred. Lin Sun ordered 3 pots of wine in a row, and put most of them into old Huang's stomach. "Your Excellency, do you know that I've been in this damn bloodthirsty battlefield for 5 years? 5 years. My companions have changed one after another. Some are familiar, some are strange. Until now, I've almost forgotten who I should remember. Others say that it's a miracle that I haven't died in 5 years. But I know that I'm just afraid of death. So, every time I fight, I try my best not to die. That's why I'm lucky to survive until now, but it's too painful to live like this. Every day when I wake up, the first thought I have is how to survive today. Who the hell cares about the future? Alas, there's nothing I can do. This is the bloodthirsty battlefield. Death happens all the time. Perhaps one day I will also," Old Huang said intermittently. Then he was completely drunk. His head fell on the table and he fell asleep. Lin Sun sat alone and drank by himself. He looked calm, but he thought of Zhao Tailai's exhortations more than once. "Remember, you must survive." At that time, Zhao Tailai's expression was unprecedentedly serious. "Survive," Lin Sun murmured in his heart. He looked at the drunk old Huang beside him and the practitioners of the Empire, who were drinking and laughing freely in the tavern. He kept silent for a long time and drank up the wine in the pot. Old Huang was an extremely fierce practitioner in Tao Insight realm. But when he was drunk, he looked so helpless and painful. This made Lin Sun realize that life in the bloodthirsty battlefield was far more cruel and terrible than he had imagined. Late at night, when Lin Sun returned to his residence and was about to push the door open, he heard a sad voice. In the far distance, a figure was kneeling in front of a stone house and talking to himself in a suppressed sob, as if he was afraid of disturbing others. "Brother, I will avenge you. I won't leave the bloodthirsty battlefield until I kill all the voodoo barbarian bastards." It was a woman with short hair that reached her ears, a thin and robust figure, and an extremely explosive and wild aura. However, at this moment, her expression carried a wisp of sorrow, while her eyes were red and flickered with tears. "What are you looking at? I'll dig out your eyes if you look at me again." Noticing Lin Sun's gaze, the woman immediately stood up and glared at Lin Sun fiercely. Her temperament became fierce and threatening. Lin Sun didn't get angry. He just said, "I'm sorry for your loss." Then he pushed the door and walked into his room. The woman stood in the darkness, clearly startled. Then, she snorted, turned around, and left. The next morning, Lin Sun woke up from meditation before dawn. I've consumed 49 high-level spiritual crystals in one practice. If it goes on like this, even if I have the opportunity to break through the realm, it will be useless. Lin Sun frowned. Beside him, there was a pile of glittering crystal powder, which was the spiritual crystals consumed in one night's practice. In the past, Lin Sun wouldn't care about this at all. But in the bloodthirsty battlefield where spiritual energy was exhausted, Lin Sun had to focus more on how to earn and save spiritual crystals. What troubled Lin Sun most was that his cultivation had reached the mastery of the middle realm of Tao insight, and it was only one step away from breaking through the upper realm. But Lin Sun knew that without the support of a large number of high-level spiritual crystals, this step was doomed to be more difficult than climbing up to the sky. Well, I'll focus on practicing martial arts and spiritual power during this period. It's not too late to think about breaking through when I earn enough spiritual crystals. Lin Sun took a deep breath and made a decision. In terms of spiritual cultivation, he had reached the second realm of meditating magic, moon transformation, and there was still a long way to go before breaking through. In the case of insufficient spiritual power, it was a very good choice to concentrate on refining the power of the divine soul. Similarly, Lin Sun still had some secret methods that he hadn't completely mastered in martial arts cultivation. For example, Lin Sun had only mastered the first 4 secret methods of 9 changes of dragons of calamity, namely Ice Dragon Step, Negative Bump, Swanee Seal, and Mighty Lower Prohibition. He had yet to comprehend and control the secret technique inheritance from the 5th to the 9th transformation. In addition, although Lin Sun had completely mastered RFS, moon-grabbing movement and sun-burning movement of Tianyuan saberplay, he knew that they were just the first half of the secret methods of Tianyuan saberplay. In other words, there was a more powerful inheritance in the second part of Tianyuan saberplay. It was a pity that Lin Sun only got the first part in the heaven accessing place. As for when he could get the second part, he was not sure. Like Tianyuan saberplay, Lin Sun mainly practiced only the first part of Spirit Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture, which recorded the cultivation methods of the 5 realms from martial realm to reincarnation development realm. Based on this speculation, the second part of Spirit Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture must contain the supreme cultivation methods of life and death realm. Unfortunately, Lin Sun failed to get the second part of Spirit Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture. When I break through the realm of Tao meaning in water, I can go to the heaven accessing place again. I hope I can get the second part of Tianyuan saberplay and the second part of Spirit Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture at that time, Lin Sun murmured. Even he himself couldn't guarantee this. The heaven accessing place was too mysterious. Now he was the top king of Tao Insight realm, no longer the ignorant rookie he used to be. But it was because the more he knew, the more Lin Sun realized the mystery and inconceivability of the heaven accessing place. At least until now, Lin Sun had never heard of any treasure in the world that could have such a magical effect as the heaven accessing place. It was absolutely against the natural order. Pushing the door open, Lin Sun immediately saw the strong, ferocious and wild woman he saw last night walking towards him from the street not far away. Lin Sun nodded out of politeness. When he was about to leave, the woman suddenly came over and stopped in front of Lin Sun. She had wheat-colored skin, and the contours of her face seemed to be chiseled by a knife and axe, showing a kind of wild and fierce beauty. At this moment, her almond-shaped eyes were slightly narrowed and shining. Staring at Lin Sun's cheek for a moment, she suddenly stretched out her slender fingertips, lifted Lin Sun's chin, and said, "Toy boy, you are new here, right? My name is Abi. I will protect you in the future. If you have any trouble, you can tell me my name." After she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Her footsteps were agile and vigorous, and her light millet-colored short hair fluttered in the morning breeze, giving her an indescribably unique elegance. Chapter 700. Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help laughing. This woman looked fierce, but she was actually cold on the outside and warm on the inside. But why did he become a gigolo? Touching his cheeks, Lin Sun felt inexplicably happy. Even though the sky was not bright yet, Camp 7 was already bustling with activity, and there was a constant hubbub. Elite Imperial Xiozhi troops were summoned one after another. Armed with weapons, they gathered on the drill ground in strict discipline. Then, led by their respective commanders, they boarded the various warships of the Empire and left the barracks amidst deafening explosions. Lin Sun noticed that among those warships, there were large Imperial mighty battleships, medium Imperial Eagle battleships, and small Ziying battleship. They flew at a low altitude like floating continents, whistling towards the vast battlefield in the distance. The scene was extremely spectacular. At the same time, many individual practitioners gathered in groups of 3 or 5, calling their companions, carrying all kinds of weapons and luggage, ready to go. Compared to the regular army, they were like numerous groups of hunters' alliances, and they were guerrilla forces. Moreover, their objective was very pure, and it was to hunt their enemies and obtain spoils of war to exchange for the wealth they needed. As the saying went, seeking wealth came from danger. Those who dared to take risks in the bloodthirsty battlefield were almost all ruthless characters. None of them was ordinary. What was more, ordinary practitioners could not survive in the bloodthirsty battlefield at all. In the supply department, I want to know some tasks about me. When he saw Lu Wenting, Lin Sun directly told his purpose. Lu Wenting was stunned. Yesterday, he was still wondering what this young man, sent here by the bloodthirsty king, was going to do. He didn't expect that Lin Sun would take the initiative to ask about this early in the morning. You will want me to arrange tasks for you? Lu Wenting asked, as if he couldn't believe it. Lin Sun nodded, looking very frank and calm. But Lu Wenting felt a headache. He was so confused that he couldn't go any further. Arrange tasks for this boy? If something went wrong, who could bear the consequences? But if he ignored him, he would embarrass Lin Sun, which was also inappropriate. What should he do? Lu Wenting frowned and struggled for a long time, and he couldn't help but ask in the end. Young Master Lin, I want to ask, what are you skilled in? Lin Sun thought for a while and said, go to the battlefield to kill enemies or refine weapons. Forging? Lu Wenting's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What did this kid mean? Could it be that he also heard something and wanted to go to the ordnance area to earn military merits? In the barracks of the bloodthirsty battlefield, spiritual tattooists who were good at refining and repairing damaged weapons were undoubtedly the most popular. Because there were fierce battles on the battlefield every day, every spiritual tattooist had endless tasks to take on. Of course, no matter how busy and tired a spiritual tattooist was, it was an extremely lucrative job in the eyes of outsiders. They could earn endless military exploits just by sitting still. However, the ordnance area was the core of the camp. Under normal circumstances, no one was allowed to interfere with the matters there. This was also to ensure that the spiritual tattooists in the ordnance area could concentrate on refining weapons and provide equipment for each practitioner in time. No, I can't let this boy make trouble there. His identity is special. If he makes trouble in the ordnance area, he will inevitably disturb the normal order there. But I can't blame him for punishing him. In this way, the situation will get worse. Lu Wenting thought for a while and directly denied the idea of letting Lin Sun go to the ordnance area to find work. The ordnance area has been full for a long time, and all kinds of positions have been filled. Lu Wenting showed an embarrassed look. Oh, in this case, can you arrange some tasks for me to kill enemies? I need to earn some military merit. Lin Sun was not disappointed and looked very calm. Seeing that Lin Sun was so easy to talk to, Lu Wenting secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, he didn't know that this was tantamount to refusing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It should be noted that Lin Sun was the youngest teenage spiritual tattooist in the Empire, and he had successfully refined the world-famous Shattering Sorrow. Moreover, Zhao Jingxuan's 9 Dragons Cauldron was also made by Lin Sun. Even the damaged spiritual tattoo Sword of Apocalypse in the hands of the Empress was repaired by Lin Sun. If such a teenage spiritual tattooist worked in the ordnance area of Camp 7, the benefits would be absolutely beyond imagination. Lu Wenting didn't know all this. In his mind, he subconsciously thought that Lin Sun was like a spoiled brat, who was thrown here by the bloodthirsty king to gild. If he knew all of this, his intestines would probably turn green with regret. Of course, there were some benefits to not knowing. At least now Lu Wenting was very happy that Lin Sun could cooperate with him so much. But immediately, he had a headache again. Killing enemies? What if he sent this boy to the battlefield to fight with the voodoo barbarian bastards, and something happened? Not to mention Lu Wenting, even Sun Lai, the general in charge of Camp 7, would have to face the anger of the bloodthirsty king. Lu Wenting wrinkled his face as if he had got constipation. He thought to himself, "Damn it, this boy is really a restless hot potato." He just arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield yesterday and didn't know the situation, but he began to be eager to make trouble. "Isn't he just making things difficult for me? What? Is there any problem?" Lin Sun frowned. Lu Wenting was too fussy. Couldn't he, a big shot in charge of military supplies, arrange a little task? This hot potato began to express his dissatisfaction. Lu Wenting's heart trembled. Finally, he gritted his teeth and took Lin Sun personally to arrange a task to kill enemies. "Child Lin, please come with me." Star Frost Mercenary Regiment. There were only 9 people in the whole mercenary regiment. The leader was Hu Tong, a seasoned overmatch who had fought countless battles in the bloodthirsty battlefield. At the same time, Hu Tong was also a famous great practitioner of reincarnation development realm in Camp 7. He had been fighting in the bloodthirsty battlefield for 16 years. In this incomparably cruel battlefield where death occurred every day, surviving for 16 years without dying was in itself a kind of powerful performance. Our task this time is to go to the Tiger Canyon, which is 1,300 kilometers away from the camp. There is a voodoo barbarian force stationed there. Our goal is to kill all of them and take away the meteorite star steel, a special product of the Tiger Canyon. Completing this task will get you 2 second-class merits and 6 third-class merits, which can be exchanged for 1,600 points in total. This is not a very dangerous task, but the journey is a little long. If we hurry up, we can return to the camp before dark. Does anyone have any objection? Hu Tong's voice was rough, but his words were sonorous and powerful. He was thin with a weather-beaten face, but there was a sense of firmness and calmness between his eyebrows. At first glance, one could tell that he was a seasoned and extremely experienced person. No. The other members of the Star Frost Mercenary Regiment all shook their heads. They had absolute confidence in Hu Tong, which was honed by years of going through trials and tribulations together. "In that case, let's go at once." Hu Tong waved his hand. However, when they just arrived at the gate of the camp, Hu Tong was stopped by Lu Wenting, who had been waiting there for a long time. "His Excellency Lu?" Hu Tong was a little surprised. He stopped at once and cupped his hands in obeisance, showing great respect. He knew that this old man, who was in charge of the military supplies of the 7th camp, was actually a powerful figure despite his ordinary appearance. No one dared to offend him. The reason was very simple. Whether it was the practitioners in the official army of the Empire or the Rogue Cultivators Alliance like Hu Tong, they had to go to the military supplies department as long as they wanted to exchange for military merit. And Lu Wenting was the head of the military supplies department. If he was unhappy, the number of military merits he could exchange for would be much less, and the key was that he could not get any good task in the future. At this moment, Lu Wenting seemed very reserved and said, Are you going to the Tiger Canyon this time? Yes. Hu Tong nodded. What can I do for you, His Excellency Lu? Take him with you, Lu Wenting said and pointed to Lin Sun next to him. His words were calm, but there was a sense of irrefutability. Obviously, this old guy had done this more than once. He seemed to be very familiar with it and was very experienced. He didn't even bother to talk nonsense. No. Before Hu Tong opened his mouth, a slender and quite handsome man in a silver robe opened his mouth. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied and frowned. We, the Star Frost mercenary group, have never taken outsiders with us. Yes, at first glance, I can tell that the boy is a rookie who knows nothing. At first glance, I can tell that he is here to get military merit. We don't want to take such a burden with us. Suddenly, many members of the Star Frost mercenary group opened their mouths to express their rejection and resistance. Lin Sun was silent, but he looked at Lu Wenting as if to say, "Is this the task you arranged for me?" Lu Wenting motioned Lin Sun to calm down, and then turned his head to look at Hu Tong and others. His old face darkened, and he said expressionlessly, "If you have any objection, then forget it." After that, he was about to leave. Hu Tong immediately stepped forward, pulled Lu Wenting away, and whispered to him. At the same time, Lin Sun was also a little surprised to see an acquaintance. "What a coincidence, Miss Abi, you are here too." Not far away, Abi, who was strong and thin, beautiful and wild, had been thinking about something and didn't notice Lin Sun. So when she saw Lin Sun at this moment, she was obviously stunned and said, "It's you, the gigolo?" Lin Sun's face darkened. Why did this woman think that he was a gigolo? "Abi, do you know him?" The silver-robed man who spoke before frowned more and more, and looked at Lin Sun with undisguised disdain and disgust. "Yes, I just met him." Abi nodded. "Abi, I advise you not to pay attention to this person in the future. He is not only a gigolo but also an ignorant and incompetent playboy. He only uses his identity to fish for other people's military merit. This kind of person is the blood-sucking worm of the Empire, which is disdainful." Knowing that Abi had just met Lin Sun, the silver-robed man became more and more impolite, with undisguised contempt in his words. Seeing that Lin Sun was with Lu Wenting and wanted to join their mission, he subconsciously thought that Lin Sun must be a playboy from some aristocratic family who came here to gain military exploit. How unsightly he was. Chapter 701. As soon as the silver-robed man's voice fell, there was a burst of laughter in the field. The members of the Star Frost Mercenary Corps were all characters who had been honed in the bloodthirsty battlefield. They had survived to the present by relying on their own abilities. Naturally, they were not afraid of any aristocratic children. Of course, they did not dare to offend such characters too much. After all, they still had to rely on big shots like Lu Wenting to make a living. Therefore, when they laughed, they did not continue to fan the flames and deliberately find fault. Even so, Lin Sun still frowned. He knew that the other party had misunderstood, but even so, the silver-robed man's words were too harsh. "It's none of your business." Before Lin Sun could speak, Abi said with some displeasure. The silver-robed man was stunned. "Abi, don't you see that this boy is a leech? How can you be friends with such a person? Who are you calling a leech?" Unknowingly, Lu Wenting had returned with a frosty expression. The silver-robed man was still dissatisfied, but Hu Tong glared at him fiercely. He dared not say anything more and closed his mouth resentfully. "Humph!" Lu Wenting snorted coldly and then said to Hu Tong, "Remember what you promised. I don't want anything to go wrong." Hu Tong nodded solemnly. Obviously, some kind of agreement had been reached between them. "Child Lin, everything has been arranged properly. I wish you a smooth trip and a fruitful return," Lu Wenting said with a smile. How could Lu Wenting not be happy that he had finally arranged this hot potato? "Thank you very much." Lin Sun nodded with the attitude of taking things as they came. "Let's go." With Hu Tong's order, a shabby treasure ship rose into the air, carrying Lin Sun and the members of the Starfrost Mercenary Corps, left the camp and flew away. This treasure ship was extremely shabby, but it was extremely stable. It flew at a low altitude as if it was on the ground. Its speed was not fast, but it was not slow either. Moving in the bloodthirsty battlefield, the sky was like a forbidden land. Flying over it would encounter unpredictable risk. However, it was only flying at a low altitude, so there was no threat to his life. Lin Sun was silent all the way. He could feel that, except for Abi, the others were a little repulsed and alienated from him. The reason he was willing to form a group with them was none other than because he wanted to see how Hu Tong and the others, who were veterans of the bloodthirsty battlefield, fought and slaughtered. This was crucial. As a newcomer, Lin only had a smattering of knowledge about the bloodthirsty battlefield. But Hu Tong and the others were all experienced veterans and had much to learn from them. Along the way, Lin soon found that although the members of the Frost Star Group seemed to be unruly, they all had their own duties. Some were keeping watch, some were preparing the supplies for the battle, and some were analyzing and arranging the specific details of this operation. On the other hand, Hu Tong commanded all of this like a wise and steady commander. Lin Sun more or less learned a lot about the bloodthirsty battlefield through their chats and inadvertently revealed information in their word. This was a form of learning. Lin Sun knew very well that what he needed at present was a kind of experience about the bloodthirsty battlefield. Only by mastering these could he live longer in the bloodthirsty battlefield. The only thing that made Lin Sun frown was that Lu Wen's attitude had been very bad since he joined the team. Lu Wen, the silver-robed man, was in the middle realm of Tao insight at a young age. In the Empire, he could be regarded as an outstanding figure of the young generation. Moreover, he had experienced many battles in the bloodthirsty battlefield, so his strength could not be underestimated. He was much stronger than ordinary practitioners, which seemed to make him extremely conceited and proud. Although Lin Sun was silent and low-key enough, it seemed that the more he did so, the more fearless Lu Wen was. Along the way, he provoked Lin Sun with disdain and contempt from time to time. Seeing that Lin Sun ignored him, he deliberately said some sarcastic words, such as imperial blood-sucking worm, ugly second generation, and so on. No matter how good-tempered Lin Sun was, he couldn't help frowning. What did this guy think he was? A target of humiliation? Don't pay attention to him. Suddenly, Abai said, as long as you can't stand it, his provocation will succeed, and then he will take the opportunity to teach you a lesson. Abai, what are you talking about? Why am I the bad guy? Lu Wen looked a little annoyed. If you want to prove that you are not a bad guy, shut your mouth. Abai looked at him coldly, not afraid of Lu Wen at all. Well, let's each make a concession. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little stiff, other members began to persuade each other, but they looked at Lin Sun with more and more repulsive eyes. Obviously, they all thought that Lin Sun's sudden joining had destroyed the harmonious atmosphere between them. Boy, I don't care who you are. Since you want to follow us to get some military merits, you'd better behave yourself. Lu Wen stood up with a touch of disdain in his eyes, and his words were full of warning and threat. Then he turned around and walked out of the cabin. Alas, I really don't know why the boss agreed to let a playboy join us. I hope he won't make trouble for us, otherwise we will be in big trouble. Trouble? Humph, on the bloodthirsty battlefield, countless young men from aristocratic families die every day. If he dares to make trouble, he is doomed to have a bad end. Some other members got up one after another and talked as they left the cabin. Their words were full of exclusion, disgust and threat, which were obviously said to Lin Sun. Soon, only Lin Sun and Abai were left in the cabin. No matter how good-tempered Lin Sun was, there was a touch of gloominess between his eyebrows. Before coming to the bloodthirsty battlefield, who dared to talk to him like this in the whole Forbidden City? You have just come to the Camp 7 and suddenly join us. It is inevitable that you will be ridiculed and treated coldly. But don't be angry. They are just complaining, not deliberately targeting you. A Bai next to him said. She was swift and fierce, full of wild temperament, but she also had a woman's delicate mind. Lin Sun sighed. I don't think so. At least I'm sure that if I give Lu Wen a chance, he will never mind giving me a hard blow. A Bai raised her eyebrows, thought for a while, and finally shook her head. Well, let's not talk about this. You stay with me all the way. I won't let anything happen to you. Why do you do this? Aren't you worried about being implicated by me and making others dissatisfied with you? Lin Sun asked with interest. A Bai snorted. I said this morning that I would protect you. How can I change my mind in a blink of an eye? This is not my style. After a pause, she whispered, Don't tell others about what happened last night. What? Lin Sun was stunned. In fact, he knew that A Bai was afraid of others knowing that she knelt and cried last night. Have you forgotten? A Bai was surprised. I can't remember, so there is nothing to tell others. What do you think? Lin Sun blinked and said with a smile. A Bai burst into laughter, and then glared at Lin Sun, saying, If you continue to be glib, I will pull out your tongue. After saying that, she couldn't help laughing again. She suddenly found that this toy boy's words were quite interesting. By the way, don't call me toy boy in the future. It's too unpleasant. Just call me Lin the 12th. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, Lin the 12th? Yes. It doesn't sound good. It's not as good as calling me toy boy. Lin Sun was speechless. Did changing a name have to be so particular about whether it was pleasant or not? Boss, I need an explanation. Why did you take that kid with you? Can't you see that this kid is a bloodsucker who snatches military merits? In another room of the cabin, Lu Wen was furious. He came with some members to express his dissatisfaction. Lu Wen, pay attention to your words. Hu Tong frowned and scolded in a deep voice. I know there is a problem with my attitude, but I just can't stand it. Why should the military merits that we risked our lives to hunt be divided up by such an ignorant and incompetent second generation? Lu Wen said angrily. Lu Wen. Hu Tong's face darkened. Don't talk nonsense with me. Aren't you just feeling uncomfortable because you see that the kid has a good relationship with A Bai? The other members looked at each other and were silent. They all knew that Lu Wen had always been in love with A Bai and regarded her as his exclusive property. Naturally, he couldn't tolerate others touching her. If the young man didn't know A Bai, Lu Wen's attitude might be better. However, A Bai seemed to take care of the young man, which made Lu Wen's attitude better. Boss, I'm thinking for all of us. How can you mention something irrelevant? Lu Wen was very unhappy and still stubborn. Well, since you want a reason, I'll tell you. Hu Tong said in a deep voice, The reason why I agreed to this matter is that Lord Lu promised that as long as we take young Master Lin with us, the military merits obtained for this mission will be doubled directly. What? Those members all gasped and looked shocked. If their military merits for this mission were doubled, wouldn't it go from 1,600 points to 3,200 points at once? This was equivalent to completing 2 missions of the same specifications. Was there such a good thing in this world? All of a sudden, those members realized that young Master Lin's identity was absolutely not simple since Lu Wenting, who was in charge of military supplies, could make such a promise. Even if he was a complete playboy, he was also a playboy with an extremely powerful background. Even Lu Wen was stunned for a while, and his lips twitched imperceptibly. After a long time, he still seemed unwilling and said angrily, Just because of some military merits, we have to associate with an imperial blood-sucking worm? Boss, you once said that you despise this kind of person the most. Hu Tong also seemed to be a little sullen and said coldly, Yes, I really despise this kind of person, but if I don't agree, it is equivalent to offending Lu Wenting. In this case, do you think we won't be troubled in Camp 7 in the future? It can be said that a word from Lu Wenting can make us not get any mission. At that time, none of us can exchange for military merits. Hu Tong's barrage of words silenced the other members. Only Lu Wen's face was livid. He was still indignant and hated Lin more and more. He thought that all this was caused by this ignorant and incompetent playboy. Remember, in this action, it doesn't matter if the mission fails, but you must ensure that young Master Lin returns to the camp safely. Hu Tong took a deep breath, and his voice was decisive and unquestionable. Other members all understood that young Master Lin's identity must be extremely special, so he could be so valued. This made them feel disgusted in their hearts, and they couldn't help but sigh that people's lives were really different. Such a playboy could get all kinds of care at will, and even Lu Wenting, who was in charge of military supplies, had to treat him with courtesy. But these people could only rely on desperate fighting to get military merits, which could be exchanged for wealth. In contrast, the difference between the two was obvious. Anyone would feel very depressed. Especially Lu Wen, who almost gnashed his teeth. Why? Just because he was a hedonistic son of a rich family with an extraordinary background, he could receive such treatment? Even a Bai was speaking for him. Why? Was it also because of the boy's identity that a Bai also treated him differently? Hateful. Lu Wen suppressed his inner anger. He was afraid that he couldn't control himself and would immediately kill the hateful toy boy. In the next room, Lin Sun, who was chatting with a Bai, didn't know that in the eyes of outsiders, he had become a heinous, disgusting and disdainful playboy. Chapter 702. 2 hours later. The treasure ship landed on the ground. Under the leadership of Hu Tong, people filed out. At the same time, a member of the Star Frost mercenary group, who was as tall as a hill, neatly hid the treasure ship in a ravine. Many decayed bones and rocks were deposited in the ravine. The treasure ship was hidden in it, which looked like a scrap and was very inconspicuous. If we go further, we will reach the dangerous area. We will encounter many teams sent by voodoo barbarian bastards. It's not suitable to fly by treasure ship. A Bai explained casually. Lin Sun looked around. The world was gloomy and covered with gray haze. He didn't need to perceive at all to feel a bloody and rancid smell coming to his face, which was depressing. The mountains were vast, barren. The earth was covered with smoke and dust, and the sky was covered with gray haze. It was like an abandoned war-torn land. Without saying much, under the leadership of Hu Tong, people swept forward all the way. Lin Sun noticed that the members of the Star Frost mercenary group all looked vigilant and cautious, like vigilant and experienced hunters. Some were exploring the way ahead, and some were observing the terrain and analyzing the route. Each of them performed their duties and cooperated with each other very tacitly. Even Lu Wen, who had always disliked Lin Sun, kept silent. He held a pair of red sabers in his hands, and his whole body was full of qi, like a taut bow that would break out at any time. When Lin Sun noticed the weapon in a Bai's hand, he couldn't help but be stunned. It was an extremely ferocious hammer, dark gray, with dense spiritual tattoos flashing on it, releasing a strong evil spirit. Such a huge hammer was casually carried by a Bai like an embroidery needle, giving people a strong visual impact. However, Lin Sun didn't pay attention to this. As a famous young grandmaster of spiritual tattoos in the Empire, he could almost see at a glance that the hammer in a Bai's hand had long been damaged. The dense spiritual tattoos on it were dim, and its power was at least reduced by about 40%. What's wrong? A Bai noticed Lin Sun's gaze. Why don't you change your weapon? Lin Sun asked. As soon as these words came out, a disdainful voice sounded. Young master is a young master, you don't know the suffering of the people. Do you think a Bai doesn't want to exchange? You don't understand at all. If independent cultivators like us want to exchange for a suitable treasure in the bloodthirsty battlefield, it requires a great amount of military merits, and it's not something that just anyone can exchange for. The person who spoke was Yang Xiong, and he was also a member of the Starfrost mercenary group. His figure was lean, his skin was bronze, and there was a deep scar on the tip of his brows. His bearing was like that of a hawk, cold, fierce, and terrifying. Other people nearby also disdained and ridiculed him. Lin's performance made them more certain that he was a pampered playboy who lived a luxurious life and knew nothing. Lin soon ignored them and said to Abi, "It won't take long for your treasure to be completely ruined. If you trust me, I'll help you repair it when we return to the barrack." "You?" Abi was taken aback. When the others heard this, they immediately stopped mocking him, and their expressions became complicated. At this moment, they suddenly realized that even if Child Lin didn't know anything, he could get special treatment that they couldn't get as long as he opened his mouth. This could be seen from the attitude of Lu Wenting, the quartermaster. For this kind of young master who could make Lu Wenting try his best to flatter and take care of him, not to mention helping Bai repair the treasure, even helping Bai to replace a new treasure, it seemed to be no problem for him. "Bai, don't you know that Child Lin can let the spiritual tattooist in the ordnance area completely repair the weapon in your hand with just one word?" Yang Xiong said sourly. Others were also silent, and their mood became more and more complicated, with envy and helplessness. People really couldn't be compared with each other. Child Lin might be very unbearable and useless, but his identity was special. He could do what they couldn't do casually with just a word. This was undoubtedly very depressing, but it couldn't be helped. This was the reality. However, they all misunderstood. How could Lin Sun, a spiritual tattooist, find someone else to help Bai repair the treasure? Wasn't this a slap in the face? However, Lin Sun didn't explain it. He didn't need to explain it to those who were hostile and rejected him, which was no different from degrading himself. Before Bai could speak, Lu Wen suddenly approached and said with a gloomy face, "No, when I go back this time, I will help Bai change a new weapon. Child Lin, you don't have to worry about it." After saying that, he also stared at Lin Sun coldly, which was a silent warning and threat, as if to say that if you dare to touch Bai again, don't blame me for being rude. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and didn't speak. Bai frowned and said coldly, "Lu Wen, how many times have I said that I will solve my own affairs? You don't need to intervene." This sentence made Lu Wen's handsome face suddenly red, and he looked a little embarrassed. He was kind enough to help, but was refused by Bai in public, which made his face a little embarrassed. However, he didn't dare to be angry at Bai, so he blamed all his anger on Lin Sun and hated Lin Sun more and more. From his point of view, the change in Bai's attitude towards him was entirely because of this ignorant and incompetent pretty boy who was spurned by others. Lu Wen snorted coldly and turned away. Before leaving, he glanced at Lin Sun coldly as if to say, "You wait and see." Lin Sun smiled and looked calm, but his black eyes were full of coldness. He was provoked again and again. Did he really think that Lin Sun was a soft persimmon that could be pinched at will? Then wait and see. Angry? Bai seemed to notice something. Angry for a person who doesn't deserve it? It's not worth it, Lin Sun said casually. Obviously angry, but still stubborn. I said that I would cover you and definitely won't let you be bullied. You can rest assured. Bai patted Lin Sun on the shoulder, like a big sister comforting her younger brother, which made Lin Sun speechless. Whining, a rush of strange whistling sounded in the distance, like the screech of a night owl. Hu Tong, the leader of the team, immediately stopped, with killing intent flashing in his eyes. 136 miles ahead, we found a team of voodoo barbarians, 19 barbarians, 12 Hercules, 6 senior wizards and 1 spirit awakener. Bai, take good care of Child Lin. Others, come with me and kill them all at once. We can earn 4 more third-class military merits. His voice was resolute and decisive, powerful and resonating. Obviously, the strange whistling was a signal sent by the scouts sent ahead. Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, all the mercenaries took the order solemnly. There was an invisible killing intent in the silence, and they rushed forward quickly. Their formation was in good order, and their actions were relaxed. They could be described as swift as the wind and aggressive as fire. Even Lin Sun had a whole new level of respect for them. Even if these guys treated him badly, each of them was a top elite when it came to a real battle. That kind of shrewd fighting instinct could only be honed in the real battlefield. "Why are you in a hurry?" Seeing that Lin Sun was about to follow them, Bai rolled her eyes. "Do you really want to fight by yourself? Didn't you hear what the boss said? Just follow me." Lin Sun touched his nose helplessly. Did they really intend to worship him? "Hey, don't you appreciate it? In order to protect you, even I didn't have the chance to kill those voodoo barbarians by myself. I'm not angry, so you should be content." As Bai said, she grabbed Lin Sun's arm and followed him far behind the team. The battle broke out soon. It was very fierce. There was no nonsense at all. When the two sides met, a fierce and bloody battle began. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was taken by Bai to hide in the distance, and could only watch the battle. However, Lin Sun was relaxed, which allowed him to observe the changes of the whole battlefield comprehensively. The details of the Battle of Hu Tong and other members of Star Frost mercenary group were also observed by Lin Sun. Elites. In just a moment, Lin Sun came to a conclusion. Hu Tong and his team were absolutely a top elite team. They cooperated tacitly and had experienced fighting means. Each of them could be called a tough guy. Especially Hu Tong, as a great practitioner of reincarnation developing realm, had a strong fighting capacity, which was much stronger than that of Qin Xuandu and Zhuo Baoying. The only thing that Hu Tong couldn't compare with Qin Xuandu and others was the weapons in his hands and the equipment on his body. They could only be regarded as ordinary goods, which couldn't let Hu Tong exert his full power. This was also very understandable. Qin Xuandu and others came from the top forces, so they didn't lack top precious treasures and equipment at all. But Hu Tong couldn't. He was just the leader of a mercenary group in the bloodthirsty battlefield. After all, the foundation and financial resources he had were limited, and he was far from being able to compete with the practitioners of the top forces in terms of foundation and financial resources. Leader Hu Tong is a great master. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. He thought of Zhu Laosan and found that the two had amazing similarities. It was just that Zhu Laosan was too taciturn, while Hu Tong had the ability that a leader should have. Of course, leader is great. In the 4 years I was in the bloodthirsty battlefield, I almost lost my life 7 times. In the end, leader rescued me in time. Not only me, but the others in the group have more or less received help from leader. A touch of heartfelt admiration appeared on Bai's face. Lin Sun smiled. He had seen this kind of look of admiration many times, but he was the one who was admired by others. Soon, the battle was over. Hu Tong and his team won. Only a few members were slightly injured. In this way, their harvest was not bad. After wiping out all the enemies, the spoils of war could be exchanged for 4 third-class military merit. We're lucky this time. Yang Xiong, Lu Wen and others all showed joy. But at this moment, someone suddenly asked, "Leader, should we also give Child Lin a share of our military merits this time?" This sentence made the original happy atmosphere disappear. The members of Star Frost mercenary group all looked a little gloomy and looked at Hu Tong. Chapter 703. Without waiting for Hu Tong to speak, Lu Wen said coldly, "Child Lin participated in the mission to Tiger Canyon. How can he have a share of the military merits picked up on the way?" "Yes, in order to protect him, we specially let Bai personally guard him. Now we get some military merit. If we give him another share, I will be the first one to be dissatisfied." Other members also spoke up to express their attitude. They had an instinctive disgust and rejection for those who ate for free. Hu Tong couldn't help frowning. He was not afraid to kill the enemy, but he also had a headache at the moment. On one side were his companions who had followed him for many years, and on the other side was a child with a special identity, which made it difficult for him to be caught in the middle. "Don't worry, if I want to get military merits, I will do it myself." Lin Sun looked on coldly. At this time, he was a little annoyed. Along the way, he was rejected and despised. But now, even some military merits were deliberately targeted at him. Did they really think that he was here to take advantage of them? "Child Lin, please calm down." Hu Tong's face changed. He and Lu Wenting had reached an agreement. How dare he really annoy Child Lin? He winked at Abai, wanting her to persuade Lin Sun. But Abai snorted, "Boss, it's not that I don't speak for you, but their approach is too much. From the moment Child Lin joined us, he was already one of us. Before completing this mission, he should have a share of any benefit. This is fair. But now let's not talk about it." "Fair?" Seeing that Abai still spoke for Lin Sun, Lu Wen's face became extremely livid. He is a guy who needs to be protected even when he takes action. How can he talk about fairness? We exchange our lives for military merits, but let him enjoy it. Is it fair? Yes, it's simple if you want to be fair. Let that kid also participate in the battle? I don't think he even has the guts. Don't count on it. This kind of playboy is so afraid of death. How can he risk his life like us? Didn't he just say that he doesn't deserve a reward for free? Even he himself feels guilty. He has no face to take this kind of free military merits. Other members had long been dissatisfied in their hearts. At this moment, they also took the opportunity to erupt and deliberately ridicule. "Enough!" Hu Tong roared, his face as gloomy as water, causing the others to immediately go silent out of fear. However, one only needed to look at their expressions to know that they were unconvinced. "Leader Hu, you don't have to feel troubled. I mean what I said. I won't accept a reward without merit. I promise I won't take a single cent of other people's military merits." In the silence, Lin Sun said calmly, "In addition, I don't want to investigate what happened before, but if something similar happens again, don't blame me for being rude. Don't stand on ceremony?" A wave of ridicule resounded in the surroundings. A profligate young master who needed their protection actually dared to threaten them? Hu Tong sighed lightly. He could only do so. This little interlude passed quickly, and the group continued on their way. It was just that the atmosphere on the road was a little dull. Lin Sun didn't say a word. Abi wanted to say something several times, but when she saw Lin Sun's unusually calm look, she couldn't open her mouth. She was also depressed in her heart. What was wrong with today's operation? Could it be that everyone couldn't tolerate a youth? He hadn't done anything out of line along the way. 4 hours later, the group smoothly approached the Tiger Canyon. This was a barren mountain range. Looking down from the sky, it looked like a tiger entrenched on the earth. One of the canyons was just like the mouth of the tiger, so it was called Tiger Canyon. The heavy gray haze gave a depressing atmosphere. The goal of Lin Sun and his team was to kill the strong Voodoo Awakening barbarians stationed in the Tiger Canyon and take away a kind of rare or meteorite star steel. According to the information, there are 3 Voodoo barbarians who are comparable to the reincarnation development realm spiritual awakening powerhouses guarding this place. In addition, there is an elite force from the fire barbarians distributed in the Tiger Canyon with about 50 people. In the distance, Hu Tong took a deep breath, with a touch of ruthlessness between his eyebrows. "Guys, this is a tough battle. When the operation starts, I will deal with the 3 strong awakening barbarians, and the other enemies will be left to you." All the people took the order. But before the operation, Hu Tong hesitated for a moment and then said, "Abai, your task is to protect Child Lin. You must ensure his safety." Hearing this, Abai didn't care, but Lu Wen, Yang Xiong and other people frowned with disdain and contempt on their faces. In the end, they still needed to protect this guy, which was disgusting. But in the face of the war, they didn't have the mood to continue to ridicule and criticize Lin. Immediately, they followed Hutong and quickly sneaked to the Tiger Canyon in the distance. You go with us. I know you are itching for a fight. Lin soon glanced at Bai beside him. No, I have to stay with you. If you make any mistakes, the boss will kill me. Bai shook her head. Seeing this, Lin soon sighed in his heart and made a decision to leave immediately after the mission. He would rather act alone than be ridiculed and excluded. The two of them also flew towards the Tiger Canyon, following from afar. Puff, puff. With a muffled sound, some strong voodoo awakening barbarians guarding the Tiger Canyon were silently killed by Hutong and others, lying on the ground without causing any wind. This was a good start. Hutong and others were all refreshed. But after all, they were experienced in battles. Even so, they still kept vigilant and sneaked carefully. Inside the Tiger Canyon was an extremely vast sandy land. A dry river had already become a ravine, winding in it. In addition, there were many tunnels and caves in the depths of the canyon, which were mines. The precious or meteorite star steel was dug out from them. But out of Hutong's expectation, they almost didn't encounter any frontal resistance and sneaked into the depths of the Tiger Canyon. Along the way, they killed a group of voodoo awakening barbarians, but they were all small potatoes and not worth mentioning. Could it be that those voodoo awakening barbarians knew we were coming, so they ran into the mines and hid? Lu Wen joked. Other people couldn't help laughing, but Hutong frowned. He noticed that the situation seemed to be a little wrong. The enemy's defense was too weak, not as strict as the news said. Sparrowhawk, have you found any traces of the enemy's retreat nearby? Hutong suddenly asked. The one called Sparrowhawk was a skinny young man who was a scout in the team. He shook his head and said, no. Hutong had a bad premonition in his heart. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared at the entrance of a mine in the depths of the canyon. It was a voodoo awakening barbarian guard. When he saw Hutong and others, he immediately screamed, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" Puff! An arrow swept out and accurately penetrated the voodoo awakening barbarian guard's throat. With a string of hot blood, he was shot dead. Yang Xiong put away his bow and arrow and smiled. As Lu Wen said, those bastards hid in the depths of the mine like rats. Get ready for battle. Hutong took a deep breath, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. This task had come to a critical step. As long as they conquered the enemy, they could return with a full harvest. In next to no time, numerous figures flashed out from the various mines that were distributed in the depths of the gorge, and they were dense like rats that had drilled out from underground. They shouted and roared, full of murderous intent. However, as soon as they appeared, they were attacked by Hutong and others. For a while, there was blood flowing. Many strong voodoo awakening barbarians were killed on the spot. This made Hutong and others excited. They exerted their special skills and tried their best to kill those strong voodoo awakening barbarians. It seems that this task will end soon. At the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, Bai looked at all this from a distance, and her lips were relaxed. Something is wrong. However, Lin Sun beside her seemed to notice something, and his deep black eyes suddenly narrowed. Bai was stunned. At this moment, a cold and majestic voice sounded, "Despicable human bastards, how dare you come to ruin our great event at this time?" Almost at the same time, different voices sounded one after another, all of which sounded grim and cold. Everyone, in order to prevent the news from leaking, let's fight together. Today, no one can escape. That's right. For a while, these voices echoed in the Tiger Canyon, which made the weather change. At the entrance of those mines, there appeared many figures with terrible power. As soon as they appeared, their horrible breath spread all over the area, oppressing the air and making it wail. 9 strong spiritual awakeners of voodoo awakening barbarians. Hutong's heart twitched fiercely, and his face became extremely dignified in an instant. Lu Wen, Yang Xiong and others, who were excited to kill the enemies, couldn't help but feel numb at this moment, and their faces changed suddenly. How could it be? Didn't the news say that there were at most 3 strong spiritual awakeners in this place? How could there be 6 more suddenly? What made Hutong's scalp numb was that with the appearance of the 8 strong spiritual awakeners, there were also groups of elite forces from voodoo awakening barbarians. There were at least hundreds and thousands of them. Shit. Retreat. Hutong and others had been fighting for a long time. How could they not understand that this time they encountered a sudden danger? Almost subconsciously they chose to retreat decisively. Oh, want to leave? It's too late. Accompanied by a thunderous roar, a mysterious totem formation suddenly appeared in the sky above the entire Tiger Canyon. The cryptic and mysterious blood-colored totem emitted terrifying rays of light that rushed out in all directions and covered the entire Tiger Gorge, producing an unfathomable aura that was like a restriction. Boom! In an instant, the whole Tiger Canyon seemed to disappear, and was covered by a scarlet totem formation. Even Lin and Bai, who were at the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, had no time to escape, and all the way back was cut off. In an instant, Hutong and others felt cold as if they had fallen into an ice cave, and their faces were extremely ugly. How could this happen? Chapter 704. It's a trap. Abi's face turned pale instantly. The formation blocked this area, and there were 9 spiritual awakening practitioners in it. In addition, there were hundreds of elite barbarians in it. It was undoubtedly a dead end. There was no possibility for them to turn the situation around with their strength. Thinking of this, Abi's heart sank to the bottom. How could this be? This is not a trap. There should be some changes here, which attracted many strong barbarians. We just happened to meet them, Lin Sun said casually. Really? Abi was stunned. She suddenly found that even in such a desperate situation, Lin Sun was still calm and composed. That kind of calmness couldn't be faked at all. Isn't he worried? Abi couldn't believe it. But before he could react, a cold and majestic voice sounded in the field. A team of rogue practitioners belonging to the human empire dares to meddle in the Tiger Canyon. How reckless you are! The speaker was a middle-aged man. He was bathed in blood-colored lightning, and his hair was entangled with blood-red electric arcs. His eyes were shining like a pair of bloody suns. In his hand there was a giant blood-colored sickle. The blade was like a crescent moon, but it was as red as blood, which was demonic and frightening. Shi Zhen, the spiritual awakening practitioner of Thunder Barbarian. Lu Wen's face changed greatly, and he exclaimed. Shi Zhen, a notorious figure in the bloodthirsty battlefield, was nicknamed Thunder Blood Sickle. He came from the Thunder Barbarian branch, and had the power of spiritual awakening. Over the years, at least thousands of practitioners of the Empire had died in the hands of Shi Zhen. In the Spiritual Awakening Bounty List, issued by the Imperial Army, Shi Zhen's name was on it, and it ranked 72nd. This was definitely a great omen. But the most terrible thing was that there were not only Shi Zhen, but also 8 strong practitioners of spiritual awakening. Just this lineup alone was enough to make people despair. Not only Lu Wen, but also other members of the Frost Star Group, felt cold at the moment. No matter how rich their combat experience was, they couldn't change anything in such a desperate situation. Ho ho, I didn't expect that someone in such a miscellaneous army would recognize me. Shi Zhen's fake smile didn't look like one. Blood-colored lightning surged from his body, giving off a bloody and domineering aura that was extremely terrifying. Even Hutong couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that the chances of turning the situation around this time were extremely slim. Is this guy famous? In the distance, Lin Sun asked with surprise. Abi was speechless for a while, and she was indescribably anxious and flustered in her heart. Who would have thought that at this time, this eldest young Master Lin was actually still paying attention to such a matter? Abi quickly said, "This guy is ranked in the top 100 on the Spirit Awakening Bounty List. He's not just famous, he's notorious. You don't understand these things, so you should first think about how to survive." In that case, I'll definitely get a handsome reward if I kill him, right? Lin Sun said thoughtfully. Kill him? Bai almost went crazy. She couldn't wait to pry open Lin's head and see what he was thinking. How could he still make such a joke at this time? Ignorant people were fearless. Was this the kind of person that they were talking about? Alright, since I'm going to die soon, I'll tell you. Shi Jin's bounty is 19 second-class military merits, 8,000 high-grade spiritual crystals, a set of Heaven Tribulation spiritual weapons, and 10 bottles of special healing spiritual medicine. Bai gritted her teeth and said with a desperate posture, over the years, I don't know how many strong people have tried to kill this guy, but they all failed in the end. Who dares to think about such a huge bounty? Lin Sun didn't speak anymore. His attitude was very perfunctory, which made Bai have an indescribable feeling. Was this guy really not afraid at all? However, when she was just about to speak, a thunderous roar came from the Tiger Canyon in the distance. Don't talk so much nonsense. It's not too late to kill these flies first. It was a strong practitioner of Spirit Awakening Realm of Fire Barbarian branch. His whole body was burning with flames, wantonly and ostentatious, like a devil bathed in flames. His name was Yan Qihang, also a ruthless character. Fight them to the death. Hu Tong roared. Although he knew that he was in a hopeless situation, he should fight to the death. Humph, you are just a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Yan Qihang snorted coldly. His figure suddenly turned into a sea of fire, covering Hu Tong. Kill. Although they were in a desperate situation, the members of Starfrost's sect were not cowards. At this moment, all of them were determined to fight desperately and would rather die than bow their heads. Boom! The battle broke out. Yan Qihang and Hu Tong fought fiercely. As for Lu Wen and Yang Xiong, they were stopped by Shi Jin alone. Yes, he was alone, holding a giant bloody sickle. The terrible pressure released by him completely suppressed Lu Wen and the others. However, he was not in a hurry to kill them. He said unhurriedly, "Kneel at my feet, and I will spare your life and give you the treatment of prisoners of war." Suddenly, Lu Wen and Yang Xiong were so angry that their faces turned red, and blue veins appeared on their foreheads. This kind of humiliation was crude and simple, but it was also the most effective. Originally, Lin Sun wanted to see how these guys would deal with it. He was not cold-blooded, but he had been ridiculed by these guys many times along the way. Taking this opportunity, he wanted to know how these guys would behave when they were humiliated. Unexpectedly, at this time, it was Abi who could not bear it anymore. She gritted her teeth and scolded, "Bastard, you've gone too far." Then, with the giant hammer in her hand, her figure flashed and she rushed towards Shi Jin in the distance. "This girl is too," Lin Sun shook his head helplessly. "Oh, you are a brave girl. However, you can't die immediately. You must kneel before me." Shi Jin seemed to be a little surprised. Then, he chuckled and a touch of disdain flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand and pressed out his palm. Boom! A blood-colored palm print suddenly appeared, pressing down on the void, covering everything. Dodge! Yang Xiong and the others were shocked and shouted involuntarily. But it was too late. Abi's reaction was too direct. Just like her character, she was straightforward and neat. Bang! As soon as Abi picked up the giant hammer, she was shocked by the bloody palm print and felt pain all over her body. Her bones seemed to be broken. The giant hammer in her hand, which had long been damaged, suddenly burst into an unbearable sound and was completely destroyed. At this moment, she was like a moth flying into the fire. She clearly knew that she would die, but that kind of generosity and ruthlessness made people unable to not be moved. A mantis trying to stop a chariot is just SOSO. Kneel down. Shi Jin's indifferent voice sounded. The bloody palm print was about to cover Abi, leaving her no way to escape. This was the power of the Spirit Awakening realm of the Voodoo Barbarian tribe, just like a great practitioner of the reincarnation developing realm. In front of this realm, Abi, who only had the cultivation of the Tao insight realm, was undoubtedly too small and unbearable. Abi's eyes were bloodshot, and her wild and beautiful face was full of determination and hatred. She did not flinch at all. Even if she died, she would not succumb. But thinking that her brother's hatred had not been avenged, Abi had an unspeakable unwillingness to die like this. This was a knot in her heart. Unfortunately, it seemed that there was no time to solve it. Abi sighed in her heart. At this moment, time seemed to be very long. She even noticed that many strong voodoo barbarians in the distance showed a playful and cruel smile. She saw Hu Tong, who was fighting fiercely with Yan Qihang, looking at her anxiously and angrily. She also saw the sad and helpless faces of Yang Xiong and others, and Lu Wen. How could he do this? All of a sudden, Abi's heart was cold. She saw a scene that made her feel stunned and chilled. After that, all of this vanished, and all that remained was a blood-red palm that was growing larger and larger in his eyes. Want me to kneel down? Impossible. Abi's pupils were full of madness, and she seemed to have prepared for the worst. Puff. But at this critical moment, a hole was suddenly blasted open in the blood-colored handprint that was expanding in her eyes, and then it exploded in front of her eyes. At the same time, Abi felt that her body was light, and then she was hugged by a strong arm and disappeared. Was she saved? Abi was a little confused, but when she saw clearly the person who saved her, she almost thought that her eyes were dazzled. How come it's you? That person was actually the pretty boy. Not only Abi, but there was an uproar in the field at this moment. Whether it was the members of Starfrost or the strong voodoo barbarians, they all widened their eyes with a shocked expression. Almost no one thought that under such circumstances, someone could defeat the palm of Shizhen, who was known as Thunder Blood Scythe. Moreover, it was a young man of Tao Insight realm. It was so incredible that the atmosphere in the field was stagnant for a short while. Especially Yang Xiong, Lu Wen, and the others, their eyeballs almost fell out. Even if they were beaten to death, they didn't dare believe that this good-for-nothing profligate young master that they regarded as a blood-sucking worm of the empire, a good-for-nothing, and a burden that caused them to loathe, had actually saved Abi's life at this moment. It was too unreal. How could it be possible? Now, it's my turn to protect you. Lin soon turned a blind eye to these. He put Abi down and patted her on the shoulder. Abi's expression at this moment could only be described as shocked and stunned. She was stunned there. Even she didn't expect that the one who saved her was not her companions, but the toy boy who had been protected by her all the way. I didn't expect that a little guy would play the game of a hero saving a beauty in front of me. But today, whether you are a hero or a beauty, you can only kneel in front of me and choose life or death. Shizhen looked indifferent and said casually. He was surprised that a young man could resolve his casual attack, but he didn't take it seriously. I have killed more than one trash like you. It doesn't matter if I kill a few more today. Lin soon looked at him with his deep black eyes. You are just an ant. How dare you boast shamelessly in the face of death? Shizhen seemed to feel ridiculous. He waved his sleeve, and a bloody thunderbolt rushed out, collapsing the void. It was overbearing and terrible, suppressing Lin soon. Chapter 705. Bang! Almost at the same time as Shizhen made his move, Lin soon shot an arrow without hesitation. From bending the bow, pulling the string, and releasing the arrow, a series of movements were completed in an instant, incredibly fast. What no one noticed was that before Lin soon shot this arrow, all the power of the cave in his body had been operated to an unprecedented peak. In other words, Lin soon had exerted his most powerful strength without reservation when he shot this arrow. Boom! In an instant, the sound of wind and thunder resounded as if there was a ghost howling. A mysterious pattern emerged on the bow made of bones and skeletons. In the pattern, suns were sinking one after another, and golden crows were pierced through one after another. Their blood dyed the sky red and they fell into the blue sea. Behind Lin Sun, a stalwart figure appeared, making the same posture as Lin Sun. The peerless posture was just like an ancient arrow god descending to the world. Boom! The blood-colored thunderbolt shot out by Shi Zhen's sleeve was almost instantly crushed by the power of this arrow, turning into a rain of light. Oh no! Shi Zhen was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell out. How could he expect that such a terrible thing would happen as soon as he made his move? At this critical moment, he roared and resisted with all his strength. The blood-colored thunderbolt around him flashed like a waterfall, and he operated his cultivation to the extreme. At the same time, a beast-bone shield appeared in front of him. This was his self-defense treasure. He would never use it unless it was a life-and-death situation. But now, he used it at the beginning of the battle, which made him feel aggrieved and frightened. He couldn't believe it. How could a young man of Tao Insight realm be so terrible? But the fatal sense of danger was unmistakable. Boom! It was so fast that Shi Zhen didn't have time to think. The beast bone shield in front of him suddenly burst into pieces. At the same time, his body was hit by a terrible penetrating force as if he was struck by lightning. The next moment, he screamed. His right arm and half of his body were smashed in an instant, and his flesh and blood splashed. He flew backward and was smashed to the ground. Bang! Smoke and dust filled the air, and the ground was smashed into a pit. Shi Zhen, who had been seriously injured, couldn't help coughing up a mouthful of blood, as if he had lost half of his life. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. Many people couldn't react in time as they saw Shi Zhen being pierced by an arrow and falling to the ground, coughing out blood. It was a horrifying sight. This shocking scene had occurred so suddenly, and it caused the atmosphere in the surroundings to become unprecedentedly silent at this moment, perfectly silent. Regardless of friend or foe, the pupils of all of them dilated, and their expressions were filled with astonishment. Shi Zhen was a notorious spirit-awakening realm expert in the bloodthirsty battlefield. His hands were stained with blood, and he was ranked 72nd on the spirit-awakening realm bounty list. Such a vicious person had killed countless Xiozha of the Empire in these years. He was definitely a ruthless character that would cause people to pale at the mention of him. But now, he was heavily injured by an arrow. If he had not dodged in time, he would have lost his life. The battle had only just begun. Who would dare to believe it? What was even more incredible was that his opponent was only a young man of the human clan, who only had the cultivation of the Tao Insight realm. Even other voodoo barbarians and spirit-awakening realm experts in the field were stiff at this moment, their faces changed dramatically, and they gasped. Shi Zhen's battle prowess was definitely one of the best amongst them, but now he was pierced by an arrow. This was too terrible. Since these spirit-awakening realm experts were so shocked, it could be imagined how the other voodoo barbarians present felt. They were all dumbfounded like clay sculptures. Abi, Yang Xiong and others were completely dumbfounded, and there was a kind of unspeakable shock rising in their hearts. Was this still the playboy whom they regarded as ignorant and incompetent? Was this still the disgusting and disdainful young man who needed their protection and only knew how to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor? They couldn't find any words to describe their mood at the moment, and their expressions became extremely wonderful. Lu Wen, in particular, almost jumped up as if he had seen a ghost, and cried out involuntarily, "How could this be? How could this be?" But he didn't know how much he had lost his composure at the moment. Even Yan Qihang and Hu Tong, who were fighting in the distance, were shocked at this moment and lost their minds for a short while. Bang! At the same time, Lin Sun shot another arrow without hesitation. Wind and thunder surged, and the roar of ghosts and gods resounded again, like a demonic sound, stirring the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Behind Lin Sun, The majestic and disdainful figure also made the same action of drawing a bow and shooting an arrow, and a shocking scene of the sun falling into the blue sky and the golden crow sprinkling blood over the blue sea emerged. Yan Qihang was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He didn't believe it before and thought it was an illusion. But at the moment when he was targeted by this spiritual arrow, he finally understood Shi Zhen's feeling. It was a feeling of being stared at by death. The fatal danger almost made his scalp explode, and his blood seemed to freeze. Subconsciously, he decisively abandoned Hu Tong, who was fighting with him, and fled to the distance like a frightened rabbit. Boom! But he still underestimated the horror of this arrow. In an instant, his body below the abdomen was directly blown up by this arrow and turned into a blood mist, leaving only half of his body. The bloody and domineering scene stimulated another burst of shock in the field. This was true. Everyone finally dared to believe it. Because not only Shi Zhen, but also Yan Qihang was seriously injured by this arrow. He was miserable and almost died. All this was caused by Lin Sun alone. From the moment he appeared in the field to now, it was just a blink of an eye, but he seriously injured 2 strong voodoo barbarians of the Awakening clan with 2 arrows. The strong voodoo barbarians in the field could no longer keep calm. Roars and uproars resounded like a noisy storm. All of them looked shocked and livid. Staring at the figure of the young man in the distance with the white bone bow in his hand, there was an indescribable chill in their hearts. Who was this guy? When did such a nature-defying figure appear in the Empire? It turns out that this toy boy is so powerful. I thought he didn't know anything. It turns out that I have been deceived by him all the time. Biting her full lips, Abi's beautiful and wild face was very complicated. There was shock, trance, a trace of anger and joy. Yang Xiong and others were shocked and ashamed. Thinking of their attitude towards Lin Sun along the way, they found that they were the real clowns, which looked funny and ridiculous. The young man was not a playboy at all, but a being like a dragon in the sky. But they were like ridiculous Bien who repeatedly provoked the majesty of the dragon. They were so ashamed that they wanted to find a hole to hide in. However, in any case, they had begun to despair before and were ready to fight desperately. But now, Lin Sun's strong appearance made them all excited, as if they saw a glimmer of hope in the midst of death. "Leader Hu Tong, please come here." Lin Sun opened his mouth. He stood there with a straight and elegant posture. His moon-white clothes were fluttering in the wind. On his delicate and angular face, there was a sense of calmness and detachment. Wudi's spiritual bow was held in his hand. The bow body made of white bones and the blood-red bowstring outlined a rough and ferocious atmosphere, which made him look like a young devil. Undoubtedly, at this moment, Lin Sun shocked the whole audience with the power of only 2 arrows and became the focus of attention. Hu Tong was also shocked, but he also knew that the current situation was still not optimistic. As a top figure with rich fighting experience, when he heard Lin Sun's words, he took action without hesitation and approached this side. He knew that whether they could get out of trouble today, the only hope fell on Child Lin. However, this made Hu Tong also have a kind of indescribable feeling. There was disbelief, guilt, and indescribable excitement and emotion. It was as if an inconspicuous blood-sucking bug that needed protection had suddenly transformed into a dragon that soared above the 9 heavens. No one stopped Hu Tong. At this moment, all eyes were focused on Lin Sun. Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang were seriously injured and almost lost their lives. They had been rescued, but it was impossible for them to fight again. However, even without the 2 of them, there were still 7 voodoo barbarians in Spirit Awakening Realm and hundreds of voodoo barbarians. The most important thing was that the area where the Tiger Canyon was located had already been covered and blocked by a large totem formation. It could be said that the situation of Lin Sun and others was still not optimistic. I didn't expect that there would be such a subversive and ruthless character among the young generation of the Empire. An old man with green light all over his body said. His name was Go Soon, and he came from the wood barbarian branch. He was extremely dignified. As he spoke, the other 6 spirit-awakening barbarians had surrounded Lin Sun in the center, looking cold and unkind. They were caught unprepared before and had no time to rescue and stop Lin Sun, which caused Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang to be seriously injured. Besides feeling astonished, they also felt humiliated, and their hearts were filled with anger and bewilderment. This was probably the feeling of being shocked, which made them become dignified when facing Lin Sun at this moment as if facing a formidable enemy. They no longer dared to treat him as a young man in Tao Insight realm, but rose to an extremely dangerous level. However, they still couldn't imagine how this young man could be so powerful. Was it all because of the bow in his hand? They were observing and keenly aware of the mystery and extraordinariness of insignificant bow. It was normal to have such an idea. After all, Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang were not ordinary spirit-awakening realm practitioners. They had been famous for a long time and had a bloody record that they could be proud of. Under such circumstances, they'd been heavily injured by a single arrow, and this seemed to be too inconceivable and world-shocking. At least, no one had heard of such a thing happening before. Therefore, they all subconsciously thought that the key to all this was the big bow in the young man's hand. Chapter 706. Even in the face of the pressure from 7 practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm, Lin Sun seemed not to feel it. He looked calm and calm. You have seen the current situation. You have 2 choices. First, let us leave and not offend each other. Second, fight. Lin Sun's voice resounded in the field, with a disdainful attitude. You want us to choose? Ju Sun, a strong practitioner of Spirit Awakening Realm of Wood Barbarian Branch, was so angry that he laughed. Little guy, do you really think you can run amok with a bow? The faces of other practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm were also a little gloomy. Lin Sun's words were like alms and orders. He didn't take them seriously at all, which made them angry. You don't accept it? Lin Sun looked at them coldly. If it weren't for taking care of your companions today, you wouldn't have a chance to choose at all. As soon as these words came out, Ju Sun's face became more and more gloomy. As strong practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm, they were also big shots in the bloodthirsty battlefield. When had they ever been ridiculed like this? Hu Tong and others looked very complicated. Before, they regarded Lin Sun as a burden and needed to be taken care of, so they were very contemptuous and disdainful of him. But in the twinkling of an eye, their life and death at this moment were entrusted to Lin Sun, and they became Lin Sun's burden, which made them feel very uncomfortable. Why do I feel that after shooting 2 arrows just now, you have consumed most of your strength? Now it's just a bluff. A strong practitioner of Water Barbarian Awakening Realm said faintly. He was covered with mist, and his body seemed to be condensed from water, which looked very mysterious. Bang! Before his voice died away, Lin Sun did not hesitate to pull up the insignificant bow and aim at him. The familiar surging of wind and thunder, the roar of gods and demons, accompanied by terrible visions, appeared in the field again. Who could imagine that Lin Sun, who was negotiating the conditions, would suddenly make such a move? Suddenly, the strong practitioner of Water Barbarian Awakening Realm screamed in horror. He had witnessed the miserable end of Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang. Therefore, he chose to dodge without hesitation. However, before he shot the arrow, Lin Sun sneered, "You said I was bluffing. Why should I dodge?" The Water Barbarian's face immediately turned red. He was flustered and exasperated. He knew that he had been tricked. This brat dared to make fun of him. His face turned green with anger when he thought about how the others had seen his sorry figure when he was dodging the attack just now. "You're going too far. I don't believe you can shoot the 3rd arrow," he shouted loudly as he withdrew a millstone of water. It was over 30 m in size, and it rumbled as it crushed through space with terrifying might. This was his trump card. Once one was hit by the millstone, no matter how strong one's physical body was, it would be instantly obliterated. Obviously, despite his anger, he didn't let it get to his head and chose the strongest means to deal with Lin Sun. It could also be seen that he also had great vigilance and fear towards Lin Sun. Bang! A smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips, and the insignificance bow was pulled to the fullest in an instant. At this instant, the gazes of everyone present converged onto the mysterious bone bow, and they clearly felt a terrifying and indescribable aura erupt from it like a landslide or a tsunami. It caused space to instantly seem as if it was being wiped out and transformed into a void. All this was because the speed of this arrow was too fast and the power was too horrible. Boom! The watery millstone was like a piece of paper, it exploded and shattered. At the same time, the water barbarian made a strange cry and dodged again. He looked more embarrassed than before, because he had long suspected that Lin Sun couldn't shoot the third arrow. Whoever thought that the cruel reality poured a basin of cold water on him, which made him frightened. However, it was already too late to dodge. With a bang, the chest of this water barbarian in the spirit awakening realm exploded and a huge hole was gouged out. As soon as he screamed, he stopped abruptly and died on the spot. All the people present felt a chill in their hearts as if falling into an ice cave. This was the first death of a spirit awakening realm practitioner. He was killed on the spot before he could dodge. The shocking and bloody scene made other spirit awakening realm practitioners feel a lingering fear. Just now, they also doubted and were ready to take action. But Lin's arrow was like a blow to the head, making them deeply aware of Lin's horror. We were all wrong. Hutong sighed softly with a complicated look. The expressions of the others changed indeterminately. Now, who else wants to have a try? In the field, Lin Sun's black eyes glanced around with a kind of frightening power. Many voodoo barbarians trembled in their hearts and dared not to look at him. What if we do it together? I'm afraid you can't save your companions alone, can you? Go Sun, the wood barbarian, looked gloomy and cold. When he spoke, he glanced at Hutong and Abi, which made the latter's face change. Indeed, if all the voodoo barbarians in the Tiger Canyon fought desperately, the final result would be really unpredictable. But it was certain that bloodshed and sacrifice were bound to be inevitable. So, you want the second choice? Lin Sun looked calm, but there was a strong killing intent between his eyebrows. I'd like to see how many of you can survive today. His voice was full of killing intent. This was the most direct threat, but it was the most effective one. With the power of the 3 arrows just now, no one dared to ignore Lin Sun's words and attitude. Seeing Lin Sun's tough answer, Go Sun and other spirit awakening realm practitioners' expressions changed again, and they were a little hesitant. They didn't want to see both sides suffer losses, but they were unwilling to admit defeat and let Lin Sun and others leave. According to my speculation, there must be some great treasure in the depths of the mine in the Tiger Canyon, so you are all attracted here, right? Lin Sun suddenly said with a faint smile. His words made Go Sun and others furious and shocked to the extreme. Hutong and others had long been suspicious. After all, according to the information, there were at most 3 spirit awakening realm practitioners in the Tiger Canyon, and there were no more than 50 voodoo barbarians stationed there. But now, 9 spirit awakening realm practitioners and hundreds of voodoo barbarians suddenly appeared, which was obviously very strange. Therefore, when they heard Lin Sun's words, Hutong and others finally realized that these voodoo barbarians came for some treasure unearthed in the Tiger Canyon. Only then did this explanation seem to be reasonable. Don't worry, I'm not interested in the treasure here. But I'm curious that if you all die in the battle today, I'm afraid there will be no chance to get the treasure, right? Lin Sun looked relaxed, but his black eyes were cold and frightening. An insignificant bow was pulled up, ready to fight. Little bastard, don't be arrogant. Your strength is limited after all. No matter how powerful you are, how many of us can you kill? A spirit awakening realm practitioner of Gold Barbarian Branch roared. He was very aggrieved. Lin Sun's look made him want to tear Lin Sun apart. Old beast, do you want to have a try? Lin Sun locked the insignificant bow, which made the spirit awakening realm practitioner's face turn blue and white. He was shocked and angry at the same time. Well, let them go. At this time, Go Sun suddenly sighed with a gloomy face. Other spirit awakening realm practitioners looked at each other and finally fell silent. They came from different ethnic forces, so it was naturally impossible for them to work together to fight against Lin Sun. In addition, the power Lin Sun had shown before was so amazing and terrible that they didn't have much plan to fight desperately even though they were furious. After all, no one wanted to die. Hu Tong and others were overjoyed when they heard Lin Sun's words. They almost couldn't believe their ears. The twists and turns and the desperate situation were nothing more than this. But they felt like they had been through a life and death situation, with ups and downs of emotions. That kind of feeling, not to mention torture, was enough to make ordinary strong practitioners collapse. Fortunately, the dawn of hope finally came. Bang! However, to their surprise, at this moment, Lin Sun pulled up the insignificant bow again and shot an arrow. However, its target was a shadowy spot nearby. In an instant, Go Sun and others all changed their faces. It seemed that they didn't expect Lin Sun to see through something. Boom! At the same time, there was a destructive roar in the shadow, and a gray figure, almost invisible, suddenly rushed out with a shrill scream. It was a spirit awakening realm practitioner of Dark Barbarian Branch. But he was bathed in blood at the moment, his skin was torn, and many parts of his body were broken. He looked extremely terrible. You can perceive it? He screamed, full of anger and fear. Lin Sun said coldly, What's so difficult about it? Hu Tong and the others gasped while their entire bodies broke out in cold sweat. Only now did they realize that if they left earlier, then they would surely suffer the surprise attack of that dark barbaric awakener that was hiding in the shadows, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Lin Sun could perceive all this keenly, which also shocked Hu Tong and others and made them feel that Lin Sun was more and more incredible. You can go now. At this moment, Go Sun spoke. He and other spirit awakening realm practitioners all looked livid. They seemed to have completely admitted that they didn't want to fight anymore. Bang! In response to them, Lin Sun pulled the bowstring to full again. The expressions of Go Sun and the others changed abruptly, and they were shocked and furious to the extreme. Could it be that this little bastard doesn't intend to leave? Does he really intend to fight us to the death? Haha! Don't be nervous, I'm just scaring all of you. However, Lin Sun suddenly smiled and loosened the bowstring. In an instant, the faces of Go Sun and the others turned livid, and they were angered to the point of almost losing control of their impulse to kill. This kid is too detestable. He's actually playing tricks on us repeatedly. Lin Sun had already left swiftly, and he led Hu Tong and the others towards the entrance of Tiger Gorge in the distance. Should we make a move? As they watched from afar, Go Sun and the others had gloomy and disgruntled expressions while killing intent coiled around their eyes. They were too disgruntled. This kid relied on a bow to easily kill one of their companions, and he'd even heavily injured Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang. If he were to lead all of them away just like that, then it would simply be an extraordinary humiliation. If news of it were to spread, then they would definitely be reduced to laughingstocks and be unable to hold their heads up high. That bow is an extraordinary treasure. One of the spirit awakening realm practitioners spoke faintly. Just these words alone caused the others to be even more disgruntled, and they were on the verge of being unable to restrain themselves. Everyone, don't forget that the barbaric blood shaman spirit formation we set up jointly is still here. Let's see if they'll be able to leave. A cold glow flickered in Go Sun's eyes. The hearts of the other spirit awakening realm practitioners jerked. They were naturally able to discern what Go Sun meant. If these cultivators of the Empire were unable to leave the formation, then… Chapter 707. Barbarian Blood Witchcraft Formation. A large formation refined by a barbarian tattoo master of the ancient barbarian bloodline gathered the power of 36 totems in the ancient inheritance of the voodoo barbarian tribe, with the blood essence of the barbarian god as the source of power. Once it was set up, it could seal the world and isolate everything from the outside world. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrible forbidden formation. If it weren't for a mysterious treasure accidentally unearthed in the depths of the mine in the Tiger Canyon, Go-Sun wouldn't have set up this formation so easily. Let's do it. We've given them a chance to leave, but if they are trapped in the formation, well, they can only blame themselves for being unlucky. Go-Sun said solemnly. Other spiritual awakeners also smiled. They were extremely afraid of Lin Sun's insignificant bow. If they could trap Lin Sun and others without fighting, they would be very happy. That bow? Someone asked. Suddenly, the eyes of other spiritual awakeners flickered. Finally, Go-Sun made the decision. It belongs to whoever can grab it. Just these words alone caused all of the spirit enchantment experts to grow even more impatient. However, the scene they expected didn't happen. Boom. When Lin Sun and others arrived in front of the formation at the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, with a deafening roar, the barbarian blood witchcraft formation, which they had absolute confidence in, was smashed by Lin Sun's palm, like a piece of paper. Go-Sun and others were so shocked that their eyes popped out, their lips twitched fiercely, and they almost bit their tongues. How is this possible? Someone roared. This is a formation set up by a barbarian tattoo master of the ancient barbarian tribe. Even a barbarian king can't break it. He is just a young man of Tao Insight realm. How could he do it? Everyone was stunned and almost thought they were dazzled. All the elite voodoo barbarians nearby were dumbfounded. That's the barbarian blood wizard spirit formation. How could it be cracked by a slap? Everyone, we'll meet again. At the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, Lin Sun turned his head and cupped his hands with a smile. Then, he floated away with Hutong and the others. Although the power system of the barbarian blood witchcraft formation was quite different from that of spiritual tattoos, the essence and mystery of the formation were interlinked. In the eyes of a spiritual tattooist like Lin Sun, this formation was full of flaws and could be broken easily. Damn it! Go-Sun and the rest were so furious that their veins were bulging. Intense unwillingness surged in their hearts, and they almost couldn't help but chase after Lin Sun and tear him apart. Watching helplessly as the enemy left, that feeling was really torturous. Even after they left the Tiger Canyon, Hutong and the others still had a feeling as if they had been separated from the world. It made them feel very illusory and very unsteady. The way they looked at Lin Sun was different from before. There was no contempt and disdain in their eyes, but shock and awe. They really couldn't imagine how a young master whom they regarded as a profligate young master could turn into another person in the blink of an eye. As soon as they thought of Lin Sun's unparalleled aura in the Tiger Canyon that deterred everyone with only a bow, their hearts trembled and they were in a trance. Needless to say, their previous understanding of Lin Sun was all wrong. Even if this guy was a playboy, he was a playboy with extraordinary combat strength. Bai hesitated to speak a few times, and when she finally mustered up the courage to speak, she noticed it was inappropriate and instantly shut her mouth. Obviously, it was already very difficult for her to tease Lin Sun as a pretty boy like she did in the past. Lin Sun smiled and didn't say anything. At this moment, he wasn't as relaxed as he was when facing the group of enemies in the Tiger Canyon. Instead, his brows were knit together tightly, and his expression was slightly tense as he led everyone to fly all the way without stopping. If I'm not wrong, those fellows will surely be unwilling to admit defeat, and it won't be long before they'll probably chase after us. Lin Sun spoke abruptly. Hutong and the others were stunned, and then their entire bodies felt horrified as their expressions changed abruptly. Exactly. How could they possibly swallow their anger after suffering such a great loss? Moreover, they've gathered in the Tiger Canyon for the sake of excavating some unknown treasure, so they naturally won't allow us to leak the news. Hutong took a deep breath and analyzed calmly. If I'm not wrong, since they've gathered in such a large force in the Tiger Canyon, then there's surely a supporting force behind them. In order to kill us, they will definitely gather troops to chase after us. Hutong was an old man who had fought in the bloodthirsty battlefield for many years. His rich experience was not comparable to Lin Sun at all. From his analysis, people could see his careful and calm mind. The others all changed their expressions. This place was far away from the camp, and it was impossible for them to return in a short time. If they were chased by the strong barbarians, the consequences would be too serious. Hutong frowned and sighed. We're in big trouble. There's no safe place within 1,000 miles of the Tiger Canyon. Unless we can rush out of this range in a short time, otherwise. He didn't finish his words, but his meaning had been revealed. All of a sudden, everyone's original joyful mood disappeared, and they became heavy again. What should we do? Their minds were in a mess. Although their Star-Frost mercenary corps had experienced many bloody battles in the bloodthirsty battlefield, those were all small-scale fights, which couldn't be compared with the dangerous hard battle in front of them. They even suspected that only the official army of practitioners of the Empire might be able to compete with those barbarian bastards. You go first. I'll contain them. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and suddenly opened his mouth. His words shocked all the people present. No. Let's go together, Hutong said without hesitation. On the way before, they had done a lot of things that were sorry to Lin Sun. Now, they could escape from death thanks to Lin Sun, who stood up and turned the tide alone. How could he let Lin Sun risk his life alone at such a time? Yes, although our strength is not as good as yours, we have never been afraid of fighting. The others also said one after another. Lin Sun had won their respect with his iron-like achievements. Moreover, out of a kind of guilt, they naturally couldn't let Lin Sun take risks alone. Only Lu Wen seemed to be very silent, or he had been silent all the way since they left the Tiger Canyon. The reason was simple. The amazing fighting power Lin Sun showed had brought such a great blow to him that he couldn't accept it until now. Lin Sun's eyes swept across the faces of the people one by one, and he was quite gratified in his heart. Since they could change their attitude towards him, he didn't save them in vain. But he had already made up his mind on this matter, and would not change it again. That's settled. I have more freedom to act alone. What you need to do is to hurry back to the camp as soon as possible. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said that he was duty-bound. No matter how Hutong dissuaded him, he couldn't change his mind. In the end, they could only accept it. By the way, go back and tell Lord Lu that when I collect enough military merits, I will naturally return to the camp to see him. Lin Sun said casually. With a flash of his figure, he floated away without any hesitation. We owe child Lin a life. Watching Lin Sun leave, Hutong took a deep breath and said firmly, This kindness is worth repaying with our lives. The others nodded solemnly. They knew that if it weren't for Lin Sun today, their Starfrost mercenary group would be completely destroyed. Only Lu Wen seemed to have a different opinion. He had been silent for too long along the way. At this moment, when he watched Lin Sun leave, he finally couldn't help saying, Owe him a life? I didn't ask him to save me. In an instant, the atmosphere was a little silent. Hutong's face became extremely cold and gloomy. He stared at Lu Wen with cold light in his eyes. Are you still not convinced? Lu Wen stiffened his neck. I admit that he is indeed very powerful. But it's impossible to change my opinion of him just because of this. Oh, Hutong withdrew his gaze and said no more. He had decided in his heart to dismiss Lu Wen when they returned to the camp. Such an ungrateful, stubborn and narrow-minded person would sooner or later be a scourge. Lu Wen, go and apologize to the boss. What you said just now is too wrong. If it weren't for Child Lin this time, who would have a chance to survive? Yang Xiong came forward to persuade him. What's more, Child Lin is helping us fight for a chance to escape. This is a great kindness. How can we turn a blind eye to it? If you want to apologize, go. I don't want to flatter Child Lin. Lu Wen snorted coldly. Yang Xiong was so angry that his neck was red. The other members also frowned, thinking that Lu Wen's attitude was a bit too excessive and ungrateful. Humph, at this time, you still have a proud and unyielding appearance. When facing the threat of Shizhen in the Tiger Canyon, who was so scared that his face turned green and almost took the initiative to kneel at Shizhen's feet? Suddenly, Abai snorted coldly. At that time, she was almost killed by Shizhen. It was also at that moment that she saw Lu Wen's face turn green and that ugly appearance of wanting to kneel on the ground to beg for his life. Originally, she still endured and didn't want to mention such a scandal. But Lu Wen's performance was too bad and excessive, causing Bai to completely explode. This one sentence made the expression of Hu Tong and the others change slightly. The way they looked at Lu Wen was different, with a touch of suspicion. Kneel and surrender to Shizhen? This was equivalent to betraying the empire and bowing to the foreign race. Don't talk nonsense. You are slandering me. Lu Wen's hair stood up in anger. His face was red as he gritted his teeth and shouted. Enough. Before we return to the camp, don't mention these things again. Hu Tong shouted. His face was livid and immediately deterred everyone. At the same time, Lin Sun's figure flickered. Not long after, he glanced around and finally stopped on a barren and withered mountain. As soon as he stood firm, his face became a little pale, and a touch of imperceptible weakness appeared between his eyebrows. It's so dangerous. I almost lost my life this time. Lin Sun sat on the ground, holding a piece of high-grade spiritual crystal in each hand, took a deep breath, and began to refine it with all his strength. Earlier in the Tiger Canyon, even though he was awe-inspiring and intimidated everyone with just a bow, only he knew clearly how much strength it consumed when he shot out each arrow. Otherwise, it would be impossible to produce such terrible power. Even if Go Sun and others were tougher at that time, he could only shoot 2 more arrows at most, and then he would be completely exhausted. However, with the power of Insignificance Bow, it was impossible for Lin Sun to kill a battle-hardened practitioner of Spirit Awakening Realm with 1 arrow even if he exhausted his strength. There was a reason for all this. At that time, there seemed to be some kind of awakening and resonance inside the Insignificance Bow, which produced an unprecedented vision and power. Its power became much stronger than before. Is it related to the mysterious treasure in the depths of the Tiger Canyon? Chapter 708. Lin Sun carefully recalled the scene at that time. At that time, when he pulled the bowstring of the Insignificance Bow, he keenly felt a different breath from the past. The whole bow seemed to wake up from silence, glowing with the strange sound of demons roaring and wind and thunder surging, which stirred the whole world. In addition, around the bow composed of white bones and skeletons, there was a terrible and magnificent scene of the sun falling into the blue sky and the blood of the golden crow sprinkling on the blue sea. No. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that he had overlooked a detail. That was, when he pulled the Insignificance Bow, there was a majestic and disdainful phantom, like an ancient archer, appearing and shooting arrows like him. At that time, there seemed to be a strange resonance, intermittent and seemingly non-existent. But if I felt it carefully, it seemed to come from the mine in the depths of the Tiger Canyon. Lin Sun's black eyes were surging with wisdom. It seems that it's true. The unknown treasure unearthed in the Tiger Canyon, even if it has nothing to do with the Insignificant Bow, must have some kind of strange power, which caused the change of the Insignificant Bow before. The reason why Lin Sun decided to stop the pursuit force of the Voodoo Barbarian tribe alone might be to help Hu Tong and others resolve the disaster. But more importantly, He wanted to go back to the Tiger Canyon again. And all of this was inseparable from the mysterious change of the insignificance bow. Not to mention these, the treasure in the depths of the Tiger Canyon must be extraordinary, as it can attract so many strong practitioners of the spirit awakening realm to gather here. Lin soon realized that there were still many unexpected secrets hidden in the cruel and dry bloodthirsty battlefield. Just like the Tiger Gorge, who could have imagined that besides producing a rare or like the meteorite star steel, an unknown and mysterious treasure had also been born there? The spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is exhausted and there is no vitality. Are there still many unknown secrets hidden under the surface of this abandoned land? About 15 minutes later, whoosh, on the distant ground line, a black shadow flashed in the void at an extremely fast speed, like a dazzling golden light. Still thousands of meters away, the figure suddenly stopped and noticed Lin soon sitting cross-legged on the top of a barren mountain in the distance. In fact, it was easy to find him because Lin soon didn't hide himself at all. You didn't run away? That figure was astonished. His entire body was golden, and even his hair had a metallic texture. His skin seemed to be cast from gold, and he had a fierce and terrifying aura. This man was Jin Wu, a spiritual awakener who had besieged Lin Sun in the Tiger Canyon. He was from the Golden Barbarians. I knew that you were unwilling, so I waited here. Lin Sun got up. The weakness between his eyebrows had long faded away, and it was filled with disdain and coldness. He stood upright on the peak of the mountain with his hands behind his back while his clothes fluttered in the wind. His black eyes were like bolts of lightning as he looked down with an otherworldly aura. Oh? Why do I get the feeling that you can't hold on any longer, and that's why you have no choice but to stay? Jin Wu's eyelids twitched, and a look of bewilderment appeared on his face. He looked around as if he wanted to discover something. Lin Sun sneered, "Don't worry. I'm the only one in this area. What's more, I don't need help to deal with you old beast." Old bastard! Hearing this undisguised insult, Jin Wu's face suddenly darkened, and he was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. This little bastard was really fearless. However, when he thought of the scenes of Lin Sun's great power in the Tiger Canyon, his heart trembled with extreme fear. Little bastard, you are too arrogant. Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have a powerful spiritual bow. I'm not afraid to tell you that many masters of our voodoo barbarian tribe have heard the news and come here. Not to mention you, even your companions have no chance to survive today. Jin Wu's face was gloomy and his voice was extremely gloomy. Of course, if you are smart, I may give you a way to survive. It depends on whether you cooperate or not. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. How to cooperate? It's simple. Give me the bow in your hand, and I'll turn around and leave immediately. Jin Wu said frankly, not concealing his greed for the insignificance bow. Ha! Lin Sun laughed. What are you laughing at? I'm giving you a chance to die. Do you think it's ridiculous? Jin Wu's face became gloomier and gloomier, and he shouted harshly, If you don't agree, it's okay. But you have no chance to survive today. Bang! Lin Sun directly pulled the bowstring of the insignificance bow and looked down at Jin Wu from a distance. How dare you, an old bastard, threaten me? In an instant, Jin Wu's face suddenly changed. He had no time to care about Lin Sun's insult. He was so shocked that he flashed away to the rear. This bow was so terrible that it had seriously injured 3 spiritual awakeners, including Shi Zhen and Yan Qihang. Even the spiritual awakener of Water Barbarian Branch was directly killed by it. Under such circumstances, Jin Wu had long been frightened. He couldn't guarantee that he could block Lin Sun's arrow, so he retreated without hesitation. Ha! Lin Sun sneered again, which seemed very harsh, which made Jin Wu's face turn green with anger. He wanted to eat Lin Sun alive. It was so annoying. Lin Sun was just a young man in Tao Insight Realm, but he dared to show off in front of him, a spiritual awakener, with a bow, and repeatedly violated his dignity. He should be burned to ashes. Little bastard, wait and see. Jin Woo let out an aggrieved and unwilling roar. He turned around and fled along the original road, which made Lin Sun stunned and speechless. It seems that these old guys are scared out of their wits. That's a good thing. Lin Sun played with the insignificance bow with a playful smile on his lips. In fact, even if he used the insignificance bow just now, it would be impossible for him to exert the power as he did in Tiger Canyon. The reason was very simple. He lacked the power of awakening and resonance, and this fact also made Lin Sun more determined to return to Tiger Canyon. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure flashed and chased in the direction of Jin Woo's escape. He was not in a hurry, just like an experienced hunter. In fact, he didn't really want to kill Jin Woo immediately, but he wanted to buy more time to restore his own strength. In his hand, he still held the high-grade spiritual crystal tightly. Although he couldn't refine it completely, it was enough to replenish his strength. There are 3,900 high-grade spiritual crystals left, which is enough for a hard battle, Lin Sun thought silently. When he came to the bloodthirsty battlefield this time, he had brought a large number of high-grade spiritual crystals, and when he set out from the camp this morning, he also exchanged all his military merit points with Lu Wenting for high-grade spiritual crystals. So there was no need to worry about the lack of spiritual crystals for the time being. How dare you catch up with me? In the distance, Jin Woo turned his head and found that Lin Sun was far behind him. He was so shocked that he almost couldn't believe it. Why don't I dare to catch up with you? Lin Sun smiled brightly, presumptuously and jokingly. You're courting death. Jin Woo was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. As a strong spiritual awakener, he was also a famous figure in the Golden Barbarian. He had been in the bloodthirsty battlefield for many years and killed countless practitioners of the Empire. He had already established a fierce reputation. But now, he was chased by a young man in Tao Insight realm like a dog chasing a rabbit. If this was seen by others, it would be a great shame. If it weren't for the insignificance bow in Lin Sun's hand, he would have gone back to kill at all costs. You're right. I'm courting death, but why do you run away? If you have the guts, stop and try to take an arrow from me. Lin Sun scolded, but in fact, he almost laughed out loud. Jin Woo was so timid that he didn't even have the courage to confront Lin Sun. Even if Jin Woo just tried, he would find that his insignificance bow no longer had that kind of fatal terror. However, this was exactly what Lin Sun wanted. Little bastard, if you have the guts, don't use that bow. Jin Woo was obviously mad with anger. It was undoubtedly a little funny for a big shot like him to say such childish word. Old beast, if you have the guts, stop! Lin Sun shouted. If you have the guts, don't use that bow. If you have the guts, stop! In the following chase, the old man and the young man scolded and threatened each other. It was obviously a matter of life and death, but the scene was full of humor. If others saw this, they would be stunned and sigh that the current ruthless characters were better at playing. Soon, even Jin Woo himself noticed that something was wrong. His old face was livid and he was so ashamed and angry that he wanted to die. What was his identity? But he accompanied a human bastard to scold him. If this was spread out, where would he put his face? Jin Woo wanted to slap himself. What was wrong with him? He was too impatient today. He was so angry because of a little bastard. At this time, a deep voice suddenly sounded in the distance. Jin Woo, why are you back? And why do you look so pale? As soon as Jin Woo looked up, he saw a tall and strong middle-aged man whose skin seemed to be made of rocks standing in the distance and looking at him in surprise. Feng Kuan, the spiritual awakener of the Earth Barbarian branch. Jin Woo was ecstatic. Feng Kuan, who was known as the mountain-moving butcher, was even more terrible than Shi Zhen, the thunderbolt blood sickle. Little bastard, your F*** king finished. No one in the world can save you. Ha 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 ha. Jin Woo couldn't help laughing. All the grievances and anger accumulated in his heart along the way were released at this moment. But when he looked back, his smile suddenly froze and his laughter stopped. Wait, where is the little bastard? When did he disappear? At the same time, Feng Kuan, who was as strong as a mountain, couldn't help asking with a strange expression, Jin Woo, why don't you laugh? Chapter 709. Jin Woo was so depressed that he almost coughed up blood. It was shameful enough to be chased by a young man of Tao Insight realm all the way. Now, he was embarrassed in front of Feng Kuan. He couldn't bear it anymore. What the hell is going on? Feng Kuan frowned. His figure was like a mountain, and his skin was as hard as stone. He was extremely oppressive. Jin Woo took a deep breath and told Feng Kuan about his encounter with Lin Sun. Of course, he didn't tell him the details of his escape. Even so, Feng Kuan had guessed most of it. His face suddenly became strange, and he couldn't help laughing. Jin Woo's face was burning. He roared angrily, "What are you laughing at? You haven't seen the big bow in the little bastard's hand. When you see it, I'm sure you won't laugh. I tell you, Shi Zhen is strong enough, but he was seriously injured by that boy and almost died on the spot. He is still recuperating in the Tiger Canyon." "Oh," Feng Kuan replied, and his expression became solemn as he pondered deeply and said, "According to what you said, this kid is relying on the mysterious bone bow in his hand." Jin Woo gnashed his teeth. "If it weren't for this bow, how could we be so embarrassed that we had to ask for help? A bone bow can give a young man of Tao Insight realm the power to go against the natural order and seriously injure Shi Zhen. It seems that this bone bow must have a great background." Feng Kuan's eyes were burning. "Tell me where the boy appeared. I will kill him." Obviously, he was also tempted to kill Lin Sun and seize the insignificant bow. Jin Woo was in a dilemma. He wanted Feng Kuan to kill Lin Sun, but he didn't want to see Feng Kuan take away the bone bow from Lin Sun. He was nearby just now. He shouldn't be far away. Jin Woo finally decided to act with Feng Kuan. He was not willing to let the big bow fall into Feng Kuan's hands. "You lead the way. Let's act together." Feng Kuan glanced at him. "I have to remind you that this time, our 9 branches of voodoo barbarians have dispatched many masters. Not only me, but also many guys around the Tiger Canyon who are almost as strong as me are also looking for the traces of those humans. If you don't cooperate with me, the big bow is likely to be taken away by others." Jin Woo's heart shook and he said, "Don't worry, I wish for nothing more than to slice that kid into pieces, so I naturally won't be careless. Let's act quickly. According to the calculations of an old fellow from the ancient barbarian tribe, the treasure in the Tiger Valley will break out of the ground in less than 3 days and completely reveal itself. We must kill that young man as soon as possible and return before the treasure is unearthed." A wisp of a murderous expression suffused the space between Feng Kuan's brows. Jin Woo no longer hesitated. He went back along the way he came and began to search for Lin. "It's going to appear in less than 3 days?" Not long after Feng Kuan and Jin Woo left, wisps of dreamy and illusory mist appeared on a pile of rocks 10,000 feet away from where they were. The haze was extremely marvelous. Its color changed and completely merged with the surrounding scenery. If one didn't look carefully, it would be difficult to distinguish it. Lin Sun's figure gradually emerged from the haze. This was Pippi Chi, the inheritance of the 5th transformation of the Tribulation Dragon 9 transformations. Pippi was an ancient divine beast. The haze it breathed could cover a world and hide a territory. It was invisible and formless. Even practitioners couldn't see through its mysteries. On the other hand, an inheritance like the Swanee Chi was a miraculous secret technique that could conceal one's tracks, conceal oneself, and deceive the heavens. Once this method was used, one's figure seemed to disappear out of thin air, and his breath disappeared. He seemed to be integrated with the surrounding scenery. Even ghosts and gods couldn't see through his existence. Lin Sun had just comprehended some of the mysteries of Pippi-Chi. Now he could at most cover his breath and hide his figure. Once he moved, his figure would be exposed immediately. On the other hand, if he completely grasped and comprehended the profundities of the Swanee Chi and attained perfection, then he wouldn't just be able to conceal himself, he would even be able to conceal the mountains, rivers, everything, and even an entire world, causing others to be unable to notice him. As Hutong speculated, in order to prevent the secret in the Tiger Valley from leaking, the voodoo barbarian tribe has dispatched many masters to hunt down the imperial practitioners. Lin Sun thought for a moment and finally determined the direction of the Tiger Valley. His figure flashed and he rushed there quickly. He had promised Hutong and others that he would help them escape back to the imperial camp. If he wanted to do this, he must contain those enemies who had already started to hunt them down. There were many enemies, and it was difficult for Lin Sun to stop them one by one. However, for Lin Sun, there was a way to achieve this goal, which was to make a scene in the Tiger Valley. The treasure in the Tiger Valley was about to be unearthed, which attracted the attention of the voodoo barbarian tribe. If there was chaos there, those enemies who went to hunt Hutong and others would definitely give up everything and return to the Tiger Valley for help. In this way, the pursuit would be indirectly disrupted, and Hutong and others would have time and opportunity to return to the camp. In the Tiger Valley, Shi Zhen sneered with a livid face. This time, more than 10 practitioners of the Spirit Awakening realm were dispatched together, and each of them was not weaker than me. It would be a joke if the little bastard could still survive. He was the dignified Thunderblood Scythe, a notorious and ruthless character. At this moment, his face was pale, and there was a hint of weakness between his brows. His arm was broken by an arrow and he almost died. Even at this moment, the serious injury on his body had not healed. Yan Qiheng next to him was also livid and gnashed his teeth. He was even more miserable than Shi Zhen. His lower abdomen was directly blown up by an arrow, leaving only half of his body. Although he could still recover, it would greatly damage his vitality. It was impossible for him to completely recover in a short period of time. Don't worry. This time, we have dispatched the top forces in our camp. Even if we meet the top figures of the reincarnation development realm in the human empire, we can still defeat them, let alone Chu Chu, a little bastard of the Tao Insight realm. On the other side, the strong practitioner of the Spirit Awakening realm of the Dark Barbarians made a resentful voice. His name was Enbegu, and he was actually the most miserable one. Wrapped in bandages, there was no intact skin. His body seemed to be broken, and his bones and flesh were broken. It was incredible that he could still be alive. It's a great shame. Shi Zhen was indignant. They were strong practitioners of the Spirit Awakening realm who had dominated the murderous blood battlefield for many years. But today, they were heavily injured by a human youngster of the Tao Insight realm. If news of this were to spread, they would definitely become the laughing stock of the voodoo barbarian tribe. This kid is destined to die. There is no need to worry about this. Yan Qiheng and Enbegu comforted him. Boom! Right at this moment, a huge explosion came from the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, accompanied by a scream that could be heard even in the depths of the Tiger Canyon. What happened? Shi Zhen stood up. Although he was seriously injured, he still had a frightening aura. Yan Qiheng and Enbegu were also shocked. Who dared to intrude into the Tiger Canyon at this time? Not good. The experts of our voodoo barbarian tribe have all gone to kill those human cultivators. There are no experts in the canyon now. Yan Qiheng's expression suddenly changed. It's okay. The Tiger Canyon is surrounded by the barbarian blood shaman spirit array. Even if a life and death king of the human race comes, he can't break in a short time. Enbegu seemed very calm. Hearing this, Shi Zhen and Yan Qiheng were a little relieved. However, the same scene occurred to them at the same time. When the young man of Tao Insight Realm left, he smashed a hole in the barbarian blood shaman spirit array with one slap. It shouldn't be him. The two subconsciously didn't think that Lin Sun, who had already escaped, would come back. At the entrance of the Tiger Canyon, Lin Sun strode forward alone in the smoke. On the way, many elite voodoo barbarians rushed out and attacked him. They were all killed by the broken blade in his hand. Their heads rolled down and blood sprinkled on the spot. In the distance, a voodoo barbarian recognized Lin Sun's identity. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. Didn't this damn human teenager run away? Why did he come back? He opened his mouth to warn Lin Sun, but a ray of saber light shot at him. With a puff, his head was directly cut off and thrown into the void. Human bastard? How dare you come to the Tiger Canyon alone? You are so reckless. Many elite voodoo barbarians had just been mobilized to support, so they didn't recognize Lin Sun, nor did they know that the young man in front of them had shown great power here before. They were full of murderous intent, and many of them were senior magi. Lin Sun looked indifferent and didn't say a word. He carried a broken blade and walked forward as if dragging a silver galaxy. Boom! Roars shook the sky. More than 10 elite voodoo barbarians rushed forward and attacked Lin Sun together. They were ferocious and frightening. Puff, puff, puff. However, Lin Sun moved faster. His blade was like lightning. In an instant, more than 10 elite voodoo barbarians were killed. Broken limbs flew everywhere, blood splashed everywhere, and the ground was dyed red with blood. Seeing this, other elite voodoo barbarians trembled with fear. Was this young man a human or a devil? He was alone, but he was unstoppable. It was too horrible. When Lin Sun arrived at the Tiger Canyon, he was extremely cautious. But after his investigation, he unexpectedly found that almost all the masters stationed here were gone. There were only elite voodoo barbarians left. Although there were many of them, they didn't pose a threat to Lin Sun. This made Lin Sun immediately judge that the masters of the other side should have gone to chase Hu Tong and others. Moreover, the other side didn't expect that Lin Sun would come back. Shit. Top masters are coming to attack. Quick, hide in the barbarian blood witchcraft formation. Seeing the bloody scenes, those elite voodoo barbarians were so scared that they hid in the barbarian blood witchcraft formation. Little bastard, wait and see. When the masters of our tribe come back, it will be the time of your death. An elite voodoo barbarian shouted and was no longer afraid. He was confident that Lin Sun couldn't come in with the protection of the barbarian blood witchcraft formation. However, the next scene stunned them all. Lin Sun stepped forward with his blade, and a hole was shaken out of the formation in front of him. Then he walked in leisurely. All the people present were dumbfounded. Some elite voodoo barbarians stationed in the canyon finally recognized Lin Sun's identity and couldn't help screaming in horror. Chapter 710. The crazy and frightened screams in the field made other new voodoo barbarians confused. But the more they were frightened, the more they fled. Not to mention anything else, the scene that Lin Sun broke the formation and walked into the Tiger Canyon calmly was enough to make them tremble. Lin Sun walked all the way along the path. His spiritual power spread out and covered the whole field. The broken blade seemed to have eyes and killed more than 10 voodoo barbarians again. Many of them were senior magi, who were powerful in the bloodthirsty battlefield. But in front of Lin Sun, they were as vulnerable as clay chickens and pottery dogs. What? That little bastard is back? Shi Zhen's roar came from the depths of the canyon. He was shocked and angry, and his eyes almost popped out. It was a mess in the valley. Lin Sun walked with his saber, leaving a trail of blood along the way. However, his clothes were spotless, and his temperament was peerless. Coupled with the chaotic and bloody scene around him, he looked like an immortal banished from the saber. It's really him. Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu also shouted and couldn't believe their eyes. This brat actually turned around and attacked. They couldn't figure out how this kid could be so bold. He had already escaped. How could he dare to come back? Who gave him the confidence? You dare to come back? You are so bold. You don't want to live. Shi Zhen roared, but he was actually a little cowardly. He had no choice. He had been seriously injured by Lin Sun's arrow before and almost died. Now he was seriously injured. How could he have the courage to fight against Lin Sun at this time? Don't you want to kill me? Now I take the initiative to come back. Why are you still not happy? As Lin Sun spoke, he raised his saber and fell. With a muffled sound, 7 or 8 nearby voodoo barbarians who didn't have time to avoid were immediately killed on the spot. His resolute and cold posture shocked Shi Zhen, Yan Qihang, and Yin Beigu. They were all trembling and their scalps were numb. It wasn't that they were careless and didn't take precautions, but they didn't expect that this human teenager had the courage to come back. Such a thing had never happened before. Unfortunately, it was too late to regret now. Boom! In the field, Lin Sun never stopped attacking. He used the ice drake steps, and his broken swords shot out violently. Accompanied by dazzling starlight and divine clouds, he killed all the enemies in the field. Let's attack together and kill this bastard. Shi Zhen's roar reverberated between heaven and earth. He wanted to alarm the voodoo barbarian and spirit awakening powerhouses in the nearby area and ask them to come to his rescue. On the other hand, Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu were even more straightforward. They sent out signals refined from beast bones to ask for help from the experts in the outside world. Lin Sun smiled. This was exactly the effect he wanted. Only in this way could those barbarians and spiritual awakeners who chased Hutong and the others have to return to the Tiger Canyon. Rumble. The slaughter continued. From the beginning until the end, Lin Sun had a ruthless, cold, and merciless attitude. He had been like this since he entered the Tiger Canyon, and he had never held back. That kind of destructive means, like that of a devil, completely frightened the elite voodoo barbarians stationed nearby, and they hurriedly fled out of the Tiger Canyon. Lin Sun didn't chase after them. He didn't come here to kill the enemy. But such a scene made Shi Zhen, Yan Qihang, and Yin Beigu turn paler, tremble, and cold hands and feet. If this guy kept killing like this, even if the reinforcements would come back, they would be dead by then. Run! Shi Zhen and the others made a sullen and shameful decision. They had no choice. In order to survive, they didn't care about their faces. The most important thing was that they were all injured and had lost the ability to fight against Lin Sun. However, when they thought that they were shocked by the human teenager again, they all had an impulse to break down and vomit blood. What a bully! In the distance, Lin Sun, who was killing the enemies, keenly noticed that Shi Zhen and the others had escaped. But different from other voodoo barbarian elites, the 3 of them fled into the mine in the depths of the Tiger Canyon. Is there any safe place in the depths of the mine that makes them choose to retreat into it so decisively? Lin Sun thought. He didn't chase after them. Shi Zhen and the others were no different from tigers without teeth, and he would kill them sooner or later. After a while, the Tiger Canyon was in a mess. Corpses were everywhere, and the ground was dyed red with blood. At least hundreds of voodoo barbarian elites were lying in the field. This scene was too horrifying and shocking. If it was in the bloodthirsty battlefield, then it could be considered as a small-scale battle, and all this was done by Lin Sun alone. Of course, more voodoo barbarians escaped than died. Lin Sun didn't stop them from the beginning to the end. He needed more enemies to help him spread the news to attract those strong voodoo barbarians who chased Hutong and others. Lin Sun began to clean up the spoils. His movements were neat and experienced. Soon, there were 3 full giant bags in the field, all of which were spoils that could be exchanged for rich military merit. However, Lin Sun soon had a headache. The bags were too big, and there were as many as 3. In the bloodthirsty battlefield where the storage treasures couldn't be used, it was also a big test to bring these spoils back to the camp smoothly. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun found a rope and strung the 3 bags together. Then, He carried them in his hand and walked towards the mine in the depths of the Tiger Canyon. Shi Zhen, Yen Qihang and Yin Beigu were still hiding in the mine. Besides, Lin Sun would not forget the real purpose of returning to the Tiger Canyon this time, the unknown treasure that was about to be unearthed. The mine was extremely deep, dark and damp, with dense paths like cobwebs extending to the depths of the earth, just like an underground labyrinth. As soon as he entered, Lin Sun keenly felt an indescribable killing intent, looming but omnipresent. Lin Sun's hair stood on end. Even he couldn't help but feel awe-inspiring and shocked secretly. What a terrible killing intent! Dragging the bags, Lin Sun moved forward vigilantly. His huge spiritual power spread out, and in an instant, he caught a trace of the remaining breath of Shi Zhen and the other two. He kept moving forward calmly. The road was winding and crisscrossing. Ordinary people were bound to get lost in it. As Lin Sun went deeper, the killing intent he felt became more and more terrible, which made Lin Sun's skin ache. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. This place was really not simple. Puff! Before long, Lin Sun suddenly stabbed the rock wall on one side of the road with the broken sword. A scream came out, accompanied by a spray of blood, and a shadow fell to the ground. He was killed on the spot. This was a strong dark barbarian. His breath was almost undetectable, but it couldn't be hidden from Lin Sun's powerful spiritual power. This was a magical effect of meditating magic, which enabled Lin Sun's spiritual power to see through all falsehoods and capture the truth. Boom! Not long after he moved forward, a bone spear rushed out of the mine and stabbed Lin Sun's throat fiercely. It was extremely fast with a terrible breath. Lin Sun didn't look at it and disappeared in a flash. Puff! The white bone spear pierced through the air. Not far away, a bloody head was chopped off, and a headless corpse crashed to the ground. Lin Sun's figure had already disappeared in the depths of the tunnel. This dark and damp underground labyrinth hid mysterious and unknown killing intent, as well as many elite voodoo barbarians lurking in it. However, Lin Sun walked forward as if he was walking on the flat ground. All the assassinations and ambushes he encountered were discovered by him in advance, as if he had foreseen them, and then he killed them without hesitation. What? Lin Sun didn't know how many opponents he had killed. Suddenly, he stopped, and his black eyes burst out light. In the tunnel ahead, a little starlight suddenly appeared. It was dazzling, illuminating the dark and damp area. The clear light was overflowing, showing a kind of mysterious and vast beauty. As he got closer, he found that the bright starlight came from the black rocks on the wall. Crack! Lin Sun cut it with his broken saber, and a black ore the size of a cobblestone slipped into his palm. The surface of the ore was flowing with dazzling starlight and had a restrained metallic texture. It was so heavy that it weighed no less than 500 kilograms. Meteorite star steel. This was the special ore in the depths of Tiger Canyon. It was a rare and precious spiritual material, and one of the materials for forging top heaven-rank treasures. At the same time, it could also be used as a medium to refine armors with spiritual tattoos, which had endless wonderful uses and extremely amazing value. Such a small piece could be exchanged for tens of thousands of gold coins in the empire. But now, the rock walls near the mine tunnel were densely covered with meteorite star steel ores. They were like inlaid stars that emitted a clear radiance that was dreamlike and illusory. No wonder the voodoo barbarians sent their elite forces to guard here. The meteorite star steel mine alone is worth it. When Lin Sun was thinking, his pupils suddenly shrank. He noticed that the broken sword had a rare obscure wave at this moment, as if it had smelled delicious food and was absorbing the power contained in the piece of meteorite star steel in its hand. Crack! In the blink of an eye, all the power of the cobblestone-sized meteorite star steel was swallowed up, turning into powder and scattering in the air. At the same time, the surface of the broken sword glowed as if it was breathing, flashing a wisp of starlight, and then fell into silence. Lin Sun had a strange feeling. It was the first time that the broken sword had such a change, taking the initiative to absorb the power. Was there some kind of power in the meteorite star steel that could promote its transformation? Clang! Lin Sun shook his wrist, and the broken sword was inserted into the rock wall on one side like cutting tofu. Suddenly, it could be clearly noticed that the broken sword produced a low and shallow sound, like a cheer, spreading obscure waves. The dense meteorite star steel ores around the rock wall began to tremble, and the luster of them began to dim rapidly. It was obvious that the power was flowing away rapidly and converging towards the broken sword. Sure enough, Lin Sun's eyes brightened. This discovery was a pleasant surprise that he had never thought of. I don't know what will happen after the broken sword absorbs the power of the meteorite star steel. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun made a decision to leave the broken sword here, and he continued to move forward with insignificant bow. Chapter 7:11. Continuing to move forward, it didn't take long for a vast underground space to appear in front of him. It was like an underground world, dark and empty. Hundreds of meters away from Lin Sun, there lay a huge corpse as big as a mountain, motionless. This was the corpse of a mysterious and terrifying ferocious beast. It was covered in ferocious dark silver scales, and just the pair of arms that were exposed were several meters long and thick, as if they were made of rock. As for its head, it was shockingly large like a house. This was a fierce beast that even Lin Sun had never seen before. There was a black arrow inserted obliquely in its head. Comparatively, the arrow was only 2 feet long and as thick as a baby's pen. Compared with the corpse of the fierce beast, it was slender and small. But it was this arrow that pierced into its head and killed it. Lin Sun's pupils shrank. When he arrived here, he finally understood that the biting murderous intent he felt along the way came from the corpse of the fierce beast. It was creepy. The murderous intent was so terrible as if it was real. Even though he was sure that the huge mysterious beast had already died, Lin Sun was still frightened and felt a kind of extreme danger. Is the mysterious treasure found by the voodoo barbarians the arrow inserted obliquely in the head of the fierce beast? As he was thinking, Lin Sun instantly found a trace of strangeness in his spiritual perception. He immediately said coldly, "I'm here. Are you going to continue to hide?" "Humph, little bastard, do you really think that we are at the end of the road and can only be slaughtered by you?" With a cold snort, Shi Zhen, Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu walked out from behind the corpse of the fierce beast. They were barbarian awakeners, and their bodies were bigger and fiercer than human beings. However, standing next to the mountain-like carcass of the fierce beast, they looked very small. "It seems that you have nothing to fear." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. He was keenly aware that these 3 strong spiritual awakeners, who had already been seriously injured, had no fear at the moment. Instead, they seemed very calm, which was a bit strange. As he spoke, Lin Sun pulled up the insignificant bow in his hand. "Haha, what a joke!" Shi Zhen's face was ashen. "You little trash, if it wasn't for that bow in your hand, how would you have the qualifications to strut around in front of us?" Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu were also full of resentment. They were the bigwigs in spirit awakening realm of the voodoo barbarian tribe, but they were forced to such a point by Lin Sun, a young man in Tao insight realm. It was a great shame. So much nonsense. Lin Sun frowned, and killing intent flashed in his heart. His opponent was too calm, which made him feel that something was wrong, and he needed to end the battle quickly. But just as the killing intent rose in his heart, a sudden change occurred. Kill! This spacious underground world was originally filled with a strand of indistinct killing intent. At this moment, it seemed as if it had smelled blood, and it instantly became peerlessly violent and transformed into material tidewater that rumbled as it pressed down towards Chen Shi. Lin Sun's soul suddenly suffered an unprecedented impact. That killing intent seemed to have traversed through the ages, bringing with it a boundless, ferocious, and terrifying might, causing his face to turn pale. Without hesitation, Lin Sun ran meditating magic. His spirit, chi, and spirit roared around him, and a vision of a full moon, blue sky, and stars surrounding him emerged in his sea of consciousness. Soon, the impact of the killing intent was offset, and his soul became much more stable. Lin Sun had been practicing meditating magic for years, and he had long known that this wonderful method had an unpredictable power. Even if his soul was injured, it would be quickly healed. Rumble, however, the killing intent between heaven and earth was getting stronger and stronger, like rolling waves, rushing from all directions. Kill! 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 It could be clearly seen that the endless killing intent surged out from the huge beast's corpse, impacting and crushing Lin Sun's soul and mind. Lin Sun's pressure doubled. I have to run meditating magic and all my spirit to resist the corpse of a long-dead beast. If it was still alive, I'm afraid it could easily kill me in an instant. Lin Sun was horrified. The killing intent here was as vast as the sea, and it was boundlessly terrifying. However, meditating magic showed an extremely magical power at this moment, which firmly stabilized Lin Sun's soul. No matter how hard it was impacted, it couldn't be shaken. Ha ha ha, little bastard, it's hard to bear, isn't it? No matter how ferocious you were, once you aroused killing intent in your heart here, you would suffer a calamity. You probably didn't expect this at all, right? Shi Zhen's grim laughter came from afar, full of pleasure. Look, this guy's face is pale, and he's trembling all over. Obviously, he can't hold on any longer. Yan Qiheng and Yin Beigu also laughed, looking resentful and complacent. The reason why they hid here was to see this scene in front of them. When the strong barbarians discovered this place, it also caused a sensation. Because anyone who came here, as long as they revealed a trace of killing intent, they would suffer terrible backfire and suppression. Even the strong in the spirit awakening realm couldn't bear such a blow. If it weren't for this, they would have taken away the beast's corpse and the arrow on it. Damn it, if it weren't for the big bow in the little bastard's hand, I would have killed him myself. How could I waste so much effort? Shi Zhen gnashed his teeth, wishing he could rush up and kill Lin Sun himself. Boom! Nearby, a terrible killing intent emerged, which shocked Shi Zhen. Just now, he inadvertently aroused a trace of killing intent, which caused the backfire of this place. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and immediately abandoned the murderous intent in his heart. Thus, he managed to resolve the impending murderous calamity. Be careful! Yan Qiheng and Yin Beigu shivered and almost jumped up in fright, glaring at Shi Zhen. Shi Zhen was embarrassed. It turns out that the reason why they fled here is to deal with me by relying on the killing intent here. No wonder they are so fearless at this moment. In the distance, Lin Sun finally understood. Suddenly, he lifted his foot and approached the beast's corpse step by step. This scene shocked Shi Zhen and the others, and they almost couldn't believe it. The killing intent was so terrible and overbearing that even they didn't dare to touch it head-on. But now, this guy took the initiative to approach it. Did he want to die fast enough? Lin Sun didn't pay attention to this. His black eyes were fixed on a black arrow inserted obliquely in the head of the beast, with a strange luster in the depths of his eyes. Only he himself felt that the insignificant bow in his hand seemed to be stimulated at this moment, producing bursts of trembling, and a mysterious breath was awakening. Soon, Lin Sun finally saw it clearly. The beast was covered with scales, like a lion or a tiger, but with a dragon's head. Its limbs were like iron pillars of more than 30 meters, and it was covered with dried blood stains. In the head of the beast, the black arrow was simple and unadorned, with only the arrow feathers glowing with a dark red luster. A mysterious breath was gushing out of the black arrow, resonating with the insignificant's bow. At this moment, even without running meditating magic, Lin Sun was sure that the overwhelming murderous intent couldn't pose any threat to him. How could this be? Has he become so powerful? In the distance, Shi Zhen's face changed and he screamed. According to their previous speculation, even if a life-death realm king came, He had to be careful and try his best to resist. Maybe he could get close to the beast. But now, a young man of Tao Insight Realm was approaching it step by step. Moreover, he didn't look embarrassed when he was oppressed by the killing intent at the beginning. Instead, he looked very calm. Impossible! Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu also shouted. They were completely panicked. They had been seriously injured before. Now their only hope was to kill Lin Sun with the help of the killing intent here. But the development of things had completely deviated from their expectations. Arrow. When Lin was still 30 meters away from the beast, he suddenly stopped and uttered a word softly from his lips. Swish. Under the shocked gaze of Shi Zhen and others, the black arrow inserted obliquely in the beast's head suddenly rushed out, turned into a black light, and fell into Lin Sun's hand. The arrow was simple and unadorned. It was as thick as a child's arm. The arrow feathers were dyed dark red, and a faint cold light flowed in the pitch-black arrow tip. Just in Lin Sun's hand, a terrifying majesty spread out from the arrow, oppressing the surrounding void to produce bursts of ripples. Boom! At the same time, the mysterious beast's corpse that was like a mountain suddenly collapsed, turned into decaying ashes, and scattered all over the ground. This, Shi Zhen and others were dumbfounded. How could this be possible? Originally, according to their estimations, this black arrow was absolutely an ancient treasure that was unbelievably formidable. If they wanted to take it away, then they had to wait for a period of time for its ferocious aura to die down before they could subdue it. This was also the reason why they had mobilized so many experts to guard Tiger Canyon these days. But who would have thought that Lin Sun's arrival would destroy all their plans? He raised his hand and easily took away the black arrow. No. Shi Zhen and others roared with unwillingness and anger. This was no different from losing the bride and the soldier. By Luo at the same time, Lin Sun murmured. He recognized that the black arrow was branded with two unique inscriptions that only existed in ancient times. This arrow was named by Luo. Little bastard, leave this treasure behind. Otherwise, no matter where you escape to, you are doomed to be hunted down by our strong barbarians. Shi Zhen and others roared angrily. They were too unwilling to give up. They had been stationed here for many days just for this treasure, but now it was taken by Lin Sun. How could they bear it? Everyone, it's time to end the game. Lin Sun raised his head and looked over with his black eyes. There was an invisible wave of killing intent spreading out from the black arrow in his hand. Puff, puff. In an instant, no matter if it was Shi Zhen, Yan Qihang, or Yin Beigu, all of them didn't have the time to react before their figures exploded into pieces. They were minced into pieces by that wisp of bone-piercing killing intent, and they transformed into a bloody mist that sprayed through the air. Moreover, not even their corpses were left behind. Chapter 7:12. In the seventh camp, Lu Wenting's face was livid, and his eyes were about to spurt fire. He roared, "Where are they? Damn it! Didn't I say earlier that you had to protect young Master Lin no matter what? But now you've come back on your own. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" His voice was like thunder, almost overturning the roof. A group of guards outside the room trembled with fear. It was the first time for them to see Lu Wenting so furious. In the room, Hu Tong and the others had ugly expressions. They lowered their heads in shame. "Hu Tong, you stay. Others, get out of here." Lu Wenting also knew that it was not a good idea to be angry. The urgent thing was to understand the situation and make remedies. When Abi and Yang Xiong left, Hu Tong took a deep breath and told Lu Wenting about his actions in the Tiger Canyon. Lu Wenting couldn't help but gasp when he heard that Lin Sun had injured several strong practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm one after another with a big bow. When he learned that in order to buy time for Hu Tong and others to escape, Lin Sun resolutely chose to stay and restrain those strong barbarians, Lu Wenting's face changed again, and his heart tightened. "No wonder you could run back to the camp with such serious injuries." Lu Wenting squinted at Hu Tong. He had found that when Hu Tong and others returned, almost all of them were seriously injured and covered in blood. It was a miracle that they could return to the camp alive. After knowing the reason, Lu Wenting realized that it was because Lin Sun restrained the enemies on the battlefield that Hu Tong and others could survive. Hu Tong took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and knelt on the ground, saying, "Child Lin saved my life. This time I came back to ask for help from Your Excellency Lu. Please dispatch some strong practitioners to save Child Lin. If he died on the battlefield, I would live in guilt and regret for the rest of my life." It's useless to say these things. If something happens to Child Lin this time, not only you and me, but also General Zhang Sun will be implicated. Lu Wenting snorted coldly and left in a hurry. He was so anxious that he knew this matter could not be delayed. If anything happened to Lin Sun, it would be difficult for Bloodthirsty King. Even General Zhang Sun will be implicated? Hu Tong's heart shuddered. Only now did he realize that young Master Lin's background seemed to be even more terrifying than he'd imagined. A moment later, a thunder-like roar came from the highest standard general's tent in Camp 7. "Lu Wenting, on the first day that brat came, you've already made such a big mess for me. Do you think the quartermaster is an idiot? Who told you to send that kid to the battlefield?" In the entire area covered by the number 7 camp, countless practitioners of the Empire stopped what they were doing, their hearts somewhat trembling. What happened to General Zhang Sun? Why did he burst into such a thunderous rage? "Guards, assemble a mighty warship and follow me to the Tiger Canyon. Whoever dares to waste time, I'll kill you." Not long after, accompanied by a roar that shook the heavens, Zhang Sun Lai's tall and straight figure charged into the sky, and he was like a smoke signal that threw the wind and clouds into disorder. Suddenly, the whole camp was in an uproar. Many practitioners of the Empire were quickly mobilized to set foot on the large mighty warship of the Empire and rushed out of the camp with Zhang Sun Lai. Many practitioners witnessed this scene and were all dumbfounded. Who on earth was so important that General Zhang Sun rushed to rescue Lin in such a hurry? At the end of the underground tunnel in the Tiger Canyon, Blue Arrow, when Lin Sun perceived the black arrow in his hand, his soul suddenly trembled, producing a stinging pain as if being stabbed by a knife. At the same time, a terrible picture was reflected in his mind. In the depths of the vast starry sky, a black arrow flashed. With a bang, a star was blown up and turned into powder. The destructive power at that moment made Lin's hands and feet cold and his scalp numb. Shooting up a star? Perhaps only the appearance of a saint could have such a monstrous power, right? Before Lin Sun could react, another shocking scene appeared. In the depths of the starry sky, a huge fierce beast carrying a bronze palace on its back emerged. The fierce beast traversed the void and shuttled through the starry sky. The bronze palace on its back was filled with chaotic chi, making it hard to see clearly. But this scene alone made Lin Sun feel an indescribable shock. It was just like a legend in the ancient times, which was incredible. The vast starry sky was so magnificent. Looking at the past and present, who could go up to the sky? But now there was a fierce beast carrying a bronze palace on its back, shuttling through the starry sky with chaotic chi. No one knew where it was going or how it would return. Boom! The black arrow appeared again and suddenly approached, as if it was going to destroy the bronze palace on the back of the fierce beast. But in the end it was hit by a brilliant and mysterious Rui Jade. Suddenly, a terrible and boundless divine light burst out, shattering and annihilating the nearby stars in the void. At this moment the picture disappeared. But Lin Sun was already in a cold sweat and his heart was scared. What kind of power did it have to be to achieve this? Who made that dazzling and mysterious Rui scepter? Was the bronze palace full of chaotic chi destroyed? Lin Sun didn't know. The only thing he knew was that the black arrow, which seemed to be invincible and invincible in the starry sky, was now in his hand. Its name was Blue Arrow. However, compared with the black arrow in the picture, The blue arrow at this moment seemed simple and unadorned, with a kind of silent aura. There must be some connection between insignificance bow and blue arrow. Otherwise, there would be no such awakening and resonance before, Lin Sun pondered. The whole body of the insignificant bow was made of white bones and skeletons, and the bowstring was as red as blood, while the blue sky arrow was as dark as the night. Only the feather and the tip of the arrow were red, simple and unadorned. One was white and the other was black. Both were embellished with blood, which looked strange and mysterious. When he got the insignificance bow earlier, Lin was curious that this bow should have a matching arrow, which might be able to exert its greatest power. Now, the appearance of blue arrow confirmed Lin Sun's guess. He even couldn't wait to have a try. What kind of terrible power would be exerted when he shot blue arrow with insignificance bow? In the end, Lin Sun resisted this impulse. If he was right, what happened in Tiger Canyon might have attracted many strong barbarians. Time was pressing and he couldn't delay any longer. Lin Sun returned along the original way. On the way, he pulled out the broken sword inserted into the rock wall. In the previous time, the broken sword almost drained all the power of meteorite star steel near the rock wall of the mine. But to Lin Sun's disappointment, the broken sword did not produce obvious transformation. At best, it was just more bright than before, and the diffusing starlight was purer. The only thing worthy of praise was that some mysterious markings of the Tao faintly floated up into appearance on the surface of the broken blade. They were strands that were faintly visible and extremely blurry, and it was utterly impossible to notice if one didn't look carefully. However, when Lin Sun tried to perceive and identify those mysterious Taoist patterns with his soul, it was also not feasible. They were too vague and obscure, which made him helpless. If the broken sword absorbs enough power it needs, maybe everything will be different from the past, Lin Sun thought. When Lin Sun returned to the entrance of the mine with 3 bags full of trophies, insignificance bow and blue arrow in his hand, he suddenly narrowed his eyes. For the first time, he noticed that there were many powerful breaths sweeping towards Tiger Canyon from all directions. They didn't hide at all, so he could perceive them without careful perception. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure flashed, and he used Ice Dragon Step. Like a shadow, he suddenly disappeared and rushed out of Tiger Canyon. Hurry up! That human boy is so audacious that he dares to come back. I won't spare him this time. Damn it! I was almost able to kill those Imperial practitioners before, but I was disturbed by such a change, and had to rush back. If I see that human boy, I will peel off his skin. A burst of swearing and noise sounded at the entrance of Tiger Canyon. Soon, many figures rushed into the barbarian blood wizard formation. Among them, there were 2 strong practitioners in Spirit Awakening Realm, Jin Wu and Feng Kuan. Beside him, there were some other strong practitioners whose breaths were not weaker than them. Obviously, those were the powerful people who came to help. When they walked into Tiger Gorge, they saw the entire place in a mess. Everywhere was covered in corpses and pools of blood, and that horrifying scene caused them to be enraged to the point of cursing and cursing endlessly. But they didn't find that when they stepped into Tiger Canyon, there was also a figure, which was almost invisible, flashed away from the barbarian blood wizard formation and rushed out of Tiger Canyon. That figure was Lin Sun. That was close. Just 1 step and I would have been blocked inside. Lin Sun secretly breathed a sigh of relief. However, before he could escape, his face changed slightly. Without thinking about anything else, he flashed and hid in the shadow at the bottom of a low hill nearby. He ran by Chi with all his strength. All the breaths of his body, together with his luggage, were hidden in an instant, as if they had evaporated into thin air. Swish! Almost at the same time, a shadow flashed, and a skinny, dark-skinned old man appeared in Lin Sun's original position like a ghost. It's him! Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank. He recognized the identity of the old man. When he arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield yesterday, He had almost killed the Shadow Man with the blood of the dark barbarian royal family. But at the last moment, he was destroyed by a horrible breath. Now, Lin soon felt the horrible breath again, and it came from the old man who suddenly came to him. A half-step king realm existence. It seems that the voodoo barbarian tribe is serious. Unfortunately, the blue sky arrow that they tried so hard to get has fallen into my hands. Lin soon tried to calm himself down. He knew that the crisis had not been resolved. The skinny old man stood still and seemed to be a little suspicious. He glanced around and seemed to have noticed something. Chapter 7:13. The skinny old man left without any danger. But Lin soon found that he couldn't leave in a short time. Because in the vicinity of this area, voodoo barbarians were approaching the Tiger Canyon like a tide. Trouble? Lin soon complained in his heart. He might not be discovered by the enemy if he covered his breath with Bai and Qi at the moment, but once he made a move, his trace would inevitably be exposed. Whoosh! After thinking for a moment, Lin soon finally decided to stay for the time being and wait for an opportunity. Taking advantage of this time, he took out some high-grade spirit crystals to absorb and refine them silently to replenish the strength consumed in the battle just now. In the Tiger Canyon, after the initial shock and anger, the scene had become dead silent and depressing. The old man named Manjiu, Feng Kuan, Jin Wu and other strong practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm were discussing the countermeasures. That damn human bastard! Who could imagine that he dared to come back? He's so audacious. A strong practitioner of Spirit Awakening Realm cursed angrily. Others were also livid. They had found that the incredible mysterious arrow in the depths of the mine had disappeared. Obviously, it was done by the human teenager. Damn it! Our voodoo barbarian tribe has been fighting in the bloodthirsty battlefield for many years. When have we suffered such a big loss? Even Shi Zhen, Yan Qihang and Yin Beigu were killed. If this news is spread out, it will cause a great turmoil. The urgent task is to catch the little bastard. That's right. This kid's cultivation is only at the Grotto Heaven stage, but he made us suffer heavy losses with the help of the extremely terrifying White Bone Bow. The most unforgivable thing is that he actually took away the treasure. According to an old monster in the ancient barbarian branch, the unknown arrow is very likely to be the ultimate holy weapon left by an ancient sage king. Its terrible power is enough to kill a powerful practitioner of barbarian king realm. If it is controlled by the practitioners of the human empire, it will definitely be an unpredictable disaster. A group of voodoo barbarians spoke out one after another. They hated Lin Sun to the extreme and couldn't bear to let him continue to live. What does the teenager look like? Manjiu, who had been silent, suddenly asked. He is about 10 years old, in the Tao Insight realm, and he looks quite handsome. Jin Wu described Lin Sun's appearance. It's him. Suddenly, Manjiu's eyes flashed with a cold light. The other great figures looked over in surprise. Does Senior Manjiu recognize this kid? Manjiu was a half-step barbarian king of the Dark Barbarian clan. His strength was terrifying to the extreme, and he was in existence only inferior to a true barbarian king. It was surprising that such a great figure would recognize a human youth. After a long silence, Manjiu finally told the truth. This boy almost killed my clan's young master yesterday. According to my clan's young master's judgment, this boy should have already set foot on the legendary path of the strongest Tao. What? Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The most powerful path of the Tao. Even if it was during the primeval times, it could be said to be a supreme path towards the Tao that drew the attention of the world. They were like kings that could crush all opponents of the same realm of cultivation. There were too many rumors about this path, and they were filled with inconceivable legends. However, no one could imagine that there was such a heaven-defying genius in Xiao Empire. This was something that had never been discovered before. When they learned that even the young master of the Dark Barbarian royal tribe was almost killed by Lin Sun, Those great figures were all shocked speechless. The young master of the dark barbarian royal tribe, named Inkay, was a peerless figure who was known as the overlord of the young generation of voodoo barbarians. Many great figures of the 9 branches of voodoo barbarians thought that as long as he set foot on the path of the Tao, he would be very likely to become a real barbarian emperor. But such a dazzling figure was almost killed by the human youth. How could they not be shocked? Report. When the great figures were shocked, the spy came to report, "We have searched the nearby area within 100 miles, but we didn't find any trace of the enemy, not even his breath." Most of the spies of voodoo barbarian tribe were dark barbarians. They were born assassins and were best at hunting and searching. But now, even these spies of the dark barbarians didn't find any trace of the human youth, which made the faces of those great figures more and more gloomy. It's impossible for a living person to disappear for no reason. Manju frowned. This lad has either used some kind of secret method to conceal his breath and escaped, or he is still hiding nearby. His words were resolute and decisive. As a half-step king of dark barbarians, his words were undoubtedly very convincing. Search. Even if we have to flatten the Tiger Canyon and dig 3 feet into the ground, we must find him for me. Manju ordered. Senior, do you think that this lad hasn't escaped but is hiding nearby? Those great figures were shocked. I've observed the traces of battle here. According to the time, it's impossible for him to have escaped far. However, there's not a trace of him in the surrounding 50 kilometers. This can only prove one thing: he's nearby. Manju's eyes were flowing with cold light, and he looked extremely confident. Suddenly, the great figures were excited, and their faces showed unconcealable killing intent and hatred. They were furious today. A human youth made them depressed and suffered heavy casualties. Moreover, he took away the treasure that they had been eyeing. How could they tolerate this? Search. Flatten that mountain for me. And the mine over there, destroy all of them for me. There was a burst of shouts in the field. Voodoo barbarian elites started to move like tides, searching the area near the Tiger Canyon by violent means, with a fierce attitude of digging 3 feet into the ground. Lin Sun, who had been paying attention to all this, frowned and realized that he couldn't hide anymore. You search here. A strong voodoo barbarian issued an order and walked over with a group of guards. However, before they took action, a ray of star-like blade light had appeared out of thin air. Puff, puff. Suddenly, 7 or 8 bloody heads were thrown into the air. Here. The enemy is hiding here. In the distance, a strong voodoo barbarian noticed this change. He suddenly let out a sharp roar with his eyes wide open. In an instant, shouts sounded from all directions. Strong practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm rushed over here one by one, and all of them were full of killing intent. It's that little bastard. Ha ha ha, this time I'll pinch him to death with my own hands. In their field of vision, they saw Lin Sun's figure flying to the far distance with all his strength. Like a hunter who found his prey, they were ecstatic. Chase him. Stop him for this, daddy. Like a tide, voodoo barbarian elites surrounded Lin Sun from all directions like a big net shrinking, trying to trap him in it. Whoosh! Lin Sun exerted ice dragon steps with all his strength, and his chi-ji ran to an unprecedented peak in an instant. He was incredibly fast, like an illusory streamer. All the enemies in front of him were torn apart by the broken blade in an instant and burst into pieces like paper. He was like a sharp awl, tearing a bloody way in the enemy army and rushing with all his strength. Escape. Lin Sun even abandoned the 3 bags full of trophies and tried his best to escape. He had no choice. There were not only a large group of strong practitioners of Spirit Awakening Realm behind him, but also a half-step king. Even if Lin Sun was confident in his strength, he was not arrogant enough to fight against a half-step king. Ridiculous! I let you escape last time because my young master ordered me not to chase you. But today, if I let you escape again, How can I call myself a dark barbarian? Accompanied by a cold and dignified voice, Manjio's figure was like a dark cloud, rumbling through the void as he rushed straight over. He was too fast. Manjio was not only a half-step king, but also a dark barbarian with unparalleled speed and assassination skills. Now, as soon as he made a move, Lin Sun, who was fleeing in the distance, felt an unprecedented danger as if there was a sword on his back. Lin Sun's hair stood on end. Bang! Almost subconsciously, Lin Sun changed his saber into a bow, pulled the bowstring to the fullest, and shot an arrow without looking back. Manjio's eyes suddenly narrowed. Caught off guard, even he was almost shot in the throat. Even so, the spirit arrow still grazed the skin on his neck, causing a string of blood to blossom. No wonder you can kill Shizhen and Yan Qihang. This bow is really incredible. Manjio looked indifferent, but his killing intent was getting stronger. He was a half-step king. Caught off guard, he was almost killed by a human teenager, which made him furious. At the same time, he couldn't help but have a burning desire for the insignificant bow in Lin Sun's hand. Dark barbarians were born assassins. If he could have this bow, Manjio was even confident that he could challenge the real barbarian king. This bow must be taken by me. Manjio's eyes locked on Lin Sun from a distance. He took a deep breath and decided to use his real trump card to suppress Lin Sun in one fell swoop. Boom! His whole body was steaming with a black flame like a mist, rising straight to the sky. He was like a devil, and the terrible pressure was like a hurricane, covering the area within 100 miles in an instant. It could be clearly seen that on his fingertips there was a gray flame, which seemed weak, but it was filled with an extremely dangerous aura of destruction. Just like the flame of hell, a single wisp of it could burn mountains and rivers. However, before Manjio could attack, his whole body suddenly stiffened, and his heart palpitated uncontrollably. This in Manjio's field of vision, Lin Sun, who was fleeing in the distance, suddenly stopped, turned around, and then pulled the big white bone bow. However, this time there was a simple and unadorned black arrow between his fingers. The blood-colored tip of the arrow was aimed at him from afar. At this moment, Manjio's scalp was numb, as if he was stared at by the god of death, and his divine soul produced a strong tremor and fear. Could this be the ultimate saint weapon that was stolen by that little bastard? Chapter 7:14. When the blue sky arrow and the insignificant bow were pulled to the fullest, all the power in Lin Sun's body poured into the bow and arrow like a whale swallowing water. Lin Sun had a feeling that his body was emptied in an instant. In the Tao Insight realm, he was strong enough to be the best in the world. He could even make grand cultivators in the reincarnation development realm feel ashamed of their inferiority. But now, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel shocked when he just pulled up an arrow and used up all its power. However, the arrow was already on the string. How could he not shoot? Lin Sun almost gritted his teeth and tried his best. Finally, at the moment when he was about to be unable to hold on, the insignificant bow was completely pulled. Bang! When the blue sky arrow was shot, a whistling sound almost like the sound of the Great Way resounded. Between heaven and earth, there was a terrible scene of the galaxy exploding and everything collapsing. Around the bow, the sun was sinking and the golden crow was crying blood. The scene was shocking and terrifying. The nearby earth, void, rocks, all fell into destruction in an instant, turning into violent turbulence, as if to drag everything into a kind of nothingness and annihilate it completely. The scene was too horrible. It was just one arrow. The world was seized by its momentum. Not good. Manjio, who had already noticed that something was wrong, was so shocked that his scalp almost exploded. Out of instinct, his figure flashed like a shadow, fleeing frantically in the void. With a flash, he was already thousands of feet away. It was incredibly fast. If a real barbarian king saw this, he would probably be amazed that the speed of the dark barbarians was the fastest in the world. There was no doubt that Manjiu was trying his best to escape. As a half-step king, an old man who had gone through fire and water for countless years, it was the first time that Manjiu had felt such a deadly danger. It was too terrible. It made his soul tremble and his mind tremble. He almost couldn't believe that there was such a terrible power in the world. Even in the face of a real king, Manjiu had never had such a panic and fear experience. Escape. Before, he was still greedy for the insignificant bow and was determined to get it, but now, he just wanted to escape as far as he could. A bow and an arrow, one more terrible than the other. Are they a pair of treasures? This man must be killed. He must not be left alive. Especially the bow in his hand, we can't let it be controlled by the Empire's practitioners. Manjiu's thoughts raced. However, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His vision suddenly darkened, and at the same time, he heard a terrifying explosion. Puff! Something seemed to have exploded, and his vision was filled with blood. Manjiu's many years of battle experience allowed him to immediately realize that this was the sound of his body exploding. However, what's wrong with the game? Suddenly, an indescribable sharp pain surged into his consciousness, and Manjiu finally realized that everything he'd sensed just now had occurred to him. His body had been killed and exploded into pieces. Manjiu suddenly felt an indescribable sense of confusion. How could this be? Why did death come so unexpectedly? This result was something that Manjiu never expected. From the beginning until the end, he didn't have the time to react, didn't have the time to sense anything, and didn't have the slightest bit of awareness before death arrived just like that. Is this the power of an ultimate holy weapon? Manjiu's last trace of consciousness was when he saw an arrow. It was as black as the dark night, simple and unadorned. It disappeared in an instant, looking so mysterious and incredible. Everything happened too fast. In the distance, a group of Spirit Awakening Realm powerhouses were chasing after Manjiu aggressively, and their faces were full of excitement and killing intent. Around them, voodoo barbarian elites were encircling Manjiu like a big net, with the same confidence to kill their prey. However, at the moment when Lin Sun shot out the blue sky arrow, all their movements stopped, and they were shocked by a terrifying roar. Then, an unforgettable scene appeared in their field of vision. An arrow pierced through the air, as if it was moving in the void. In an instant, Manjiu, who was at the half-step king realm, was killed on the spot. Just one arrow. At that moment, whether it was Feng Kuan, Jin Wu, other Spirit Awakening Realm powerhouses, or the nearby voodoo barbarian elites, they were all stunned, and their minds went blank. That was Manjiu. A terrifying existence with one foot in the barbarian king realm. He could be regarded as a top figure in the voodoo barbarian tribe. But he couldn't stop this arrow. He was directly killed on the spot, and his body burst into blood foam, which dyed the void red. It was so miserable that it made people desperate. How could this be? What a terrible arrow! No. For a long time, the oppressive and silent atmosphere was replaced by an uproar that resounded through the world. Every voodoo barbarian's face was full of horror, confusion, grief, and disbelief. Including those Spirit Awakening Realm powerhouses, their faces were gloomy, their hearts were trembling, and their bodies were trembling. A half-step king realm powerhouse, or a top figure of the older generation of dark barbarians, was killed like this? This scene was too world-shocking, and no matter who saw it, that person's heart would probably go cold and their soul would leave their body. After all, who could imagine that the murderer was just a human teenager in Tao Insight Realm with a bow and an arrow? Fear, like an invisible tide, spread in the whole area. Everyone's eyes on Lin Sun had completely changed with deep fear. This youth had once, alone and holding a white bone bow, intimidated the warriors of Tiger Valley, and successfully saved the Xiozha of the Empire. It was also this young man who suddenly returned to the Tiger Canyon and killed countless voodoo barbarians, leaving the ground in a mess and countless pools of blood. Now, He drew his bow and put an arrow on it, and killed Mangio, a half-step king realm powerhouse, under the attention of thousands of people. Under such circumstances, who wouldn't be afraid? Wouldn't be frightened? In the hearts of these voodoo barbarians, Lin Sun was like a young demon in the human tribe at this moment, which made their hearts tremble. Don't panic. Suddenly, a deep shout sounded. It was Feng Kuan. He noticed that the fighting spirit of the people on their side was declining sharply, which was not a good thing. The arrow just made him lose all his strength. At this moment, he is just an arrow at the end of its flight, vulnerable to a single blow. Feng Kuan's voice resounded through the whole area like thunder. Don't you see? He has no strength to escape now. Suddenly, many voodoo barbarians woke up from the shock. Sure enough, they found that the young man in the distance was standing still with a pale face. If they looked carefully, they would find that his hands were trembling slightly. If he still had strength, how could he give up the best opportunity to escape at this moment? Realizing this, the fear in the hearts of these spiritual awakeners faded a lot. When they looked at Lin Sun again, there was a hint of killing intent in their eyes. This young man must not be left alive. If they didn't take this opportunity to kill him, perhaps only the real barbarian king could capture and kill him in the bloodthirsty battlefield in the future. The most important thing was that the bow and arrow were too powerful and horrible. If they didn't seize them, it would definitely be a disaster rather than a blessing for the voodoo barbarian tribe. The atmosphere changed. Lin Sun was keenly aware of this scene. He had already expected that the shot just now might be able to frighten all the enemies, but as long as they paid attention to him, they would inevitably find that he was on the verge of exhaustion. This was also the reason why Lin Sun stood where he was instead of choosing to escape. There was no other way. All the strength in his body had been drained by the arrow just now, and he had no ability to escape at all. It could be said that at this moment, his situation was extremely bad. But on the surface, Lin Sun still looked very calm at this moment. Facing the tentative, suspicious, and cold eyes around him, he slightly moved his lips and spat out only 2 words, "Arrow." The plain voice was like a decree that could not be disobeyed. With a clang, a black light suddenly came from a far place and floated above Lin's palm with a buzzing sound. It was the arrow of blue sky. Its color was as deep as the eternal night, and the tip of the arrow was dyed with dark red blood light. However, the pressure emanating from the arrow caused ripples to appear in the void. Suddenly, all the people present changed their expressions. Some spiritual awakeners who were eager to take action also narrowed their eyes at this moment, revealing deep fear and surprise. Could it be that Lin Sun still had the power to fight? All the people present became silent again. They were shocked. The power of the arrow of blue sky was obvious to all. Even a half-step king couldn't escape from it. Now, who dared to be the first to test it? The power of the arrow was vividly reflected at this moment. However, despite the fear, none of the strong barbarians present chose to retreat. Obviously, they were all waiting, or doubting whether Lin Sun could hold on any longer. What? Are you all cowards in voodoo barbarian tribe? You don't even have the courage to fight? Lin Sun sneered. His voice was not loud, but it made the faces of the strong barbarians present suddenly become very gloomy. Humph! If you have the power to fight, why don't you move? Feng Kuan snorted coldly. Or are you just pretending? In fact, you're almost unable to hold on? Lin Sun said casually, Don't talk so much nonsense. You can have a try yourself. Feng Kuan narrowed his eyes and suddenly ordered some nearby barbarian guards, Go and kill this man. He is pretending. Don't be nervous. Those barbarian guards all changed their expressions and complained in their hearts. They had long been frightened and didn't want to test Lin Sun at all, because the result would be unimaginable. But they dared not disobey, so they could only bite the bullet and rush towards Lin Sun in the distance. Puff, puff. However, before they approached, a black light as thin as a cow's hair suddenly flashed from Lin Sun's fingertips, rushed out of those barbarian guards and disappeared. The next moment they screamed and fell to the ground one by one. It could be clearly seen that their bodies were still alive, but their souls were gone. Spirit-eating insects. These strange ancient insects, which had been sealed in Lin Sun's sea of consciousness, finally came in handy at this moment. Hiss!